The first thing I noticed was that my hands were too pretty. Not in a normal way. Like, aggressively, unfairly, suspiciously pretty. Long fingers, smooth skin nails, that looked like someone had paid money for them. I sat up slowly, looked around the room, and realized three things very fast. 1. This room was enormous, and way too fancy for someone like me. 2. The mirror across the room was showing me a face that was definitely not mine. 3. There was a sword on the wall, an actual sword, just hanging there like interior decoration. I got up carefully, walked to the mirror, and stared. The face looking back at me was beautiful in that sharp, cold way that villains in stories always are. High cheekbones, dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it had never smiled warmly at anyone in its life. I had read enough stories to know what this kind of face meant. This was a villain face. My name, as far as the memories flooding into my head could tell me, was Cassian Vore, second son of the powerful Vore family, twin brother of Dorian Vore, who was the actual villain of the novel I had apparently fallen into. A novel called The Emperor's Sword, which I had read twice and rated 4 out of 5 stars because the ending made me cry in a coffee shop. I knew this story. I knew exactly what happened to Cassian Vore. He was used by his twin brother as a decoy. He took the blame for things Dorian did, and in chapter 14 he was executed publicly, while Dorian watched from a balcony and did not even look sad about it. I sat back down on the very expensive bed and put my face in my hands. "Okay," I said to no one. "Okay, this is fine. This is completely fine." It was not fine. I had about 3 months before chapter 14. 3 months to figure out how to not get executed for crimes I did not commit, while also not attracting attention from anyone important in this story. The plan was simple. Stay quiet. Stay in my room. Let Dorian do his villain things without me anywhere nearby. Do not, under any circumstances, get involved with the male lead. The male lead of The Emperor's Sword was a man named Ezrin Holt, captain of the Imperial Guard. Tall, serious, loyal to a fault, and completely devoted to justice. In the novel, he was the one who eventually caught Dorian and stopped him. He was good and noble, and honestly a little boring, which is why I had given the novel 4 stars instead of 5. In the novel, Cassian and Ezrin had exactly 2 interactions. One where Ezrin arrested Cassian by mistake, and one where Ezrin realized the mistake, but it was too late, because Cassian was already sentenced. I was not going to let that happen. I had a plan. The plan lasted about 4 hours. I had decided to sneak out of the Vora estate to get a better sense of the city layout, because in the novel the city had 3 exits and I needed to know which one was least guarded. I wore a plain cloak over the fancy clothes, pulled the hood up, and felt very clever about the whole thing. Then I turned a corner near the market and walked directly into a fight. Not a small argument, an actual physical fight. 3 men in dark coats had someone pressed against the wall of an alley, and the someone was clearly losing. I should have walked away. Any smart person would have walked away, but the someone made a sound that was very obviously pain, and my legs made a decision my brain had not agreed to yet. I stepped in. I had never fought anyone in my actual life, but Cassian's body apparently had training, because my hands moved before I thought about it. I hit the first man hard enough to make him stumble. The second one turned on me, and I ducked without knowing I was going to. The third one ran. The first 2 looked at each other, looked at me, and ran after the third. I stood there breathing hard and looked at the person I had just rescued. He was tall, dark hair, the kind of face that looked serious even when it was surprised. He wore a captain's insignia on his coat. My brain went completely blank. Ezrin Holt looked at me for a long moment. "You just fought 3 armed men," he said. "I have no idea why," I said honestly. He almost smiled. Almost. "Are you hurt?" I looked at my hands. One of my knuckles was bleeding. A little. He reached into his coat, took out a cloth, and handed it to me. "You're Cassian Vore," he said. It was not a question. "Unfortunately," I said. He looked at me like that was a strange answer. It was a strange answer. But he did not walk away. He stood there while I wrapped my hand, and then he said, "I'll walk you back to the estate." This was already going wrong. 3 days after the alley incident, I had almost convinced myself it was not a big deal. Almost. The problem was that Ezrin Holt had walked me back to the estate, stood at the gate until I was safely inside, and then said, "Be careful," in a voice that sounded like he meant it. And that was somehow worse than anything else that had happened. In the novel, Ezrin never said anything kind to Cassian. He barely looked at him. But here he was, being careful and handing me cloth for my bleeding hand, and existing in ways the story had not prepared me for. I sat in the library, because Cassian apparently spent a lot of time there, and I was trying to be consistent, and opened a book I was not reading, and thought about what this meant. The answer I kept arriving at was, nothing good. If Ezrin started paying attention to me, that was a problem. The entire point of my survival plan was to be invisible, to be the Vore twin no one noticed. If the male lead of this story started treating me like a person instead of background furniture, things were going to get complicated very fast. "You look very unhappy for someone sitting in a comfortable chair," said a voice. I looked up. A boy about my age was standing in the doorway of the library, looking at me with open curiosity. He had a friendly face, and the kind of smile that made you want to trust him immediately. In the novel, I recognized him after a moment. This was Pel Oren, Ezrin's junior officer and the main source of comic relief in chapters 6 through 9. "I am not unhappy," I said. "I am thinking." "Those look the same on you," he said, walking in like I had invited him. "Also, I came to tell you that Captain Holt wants to know if you would be willing to make a statement about the incident in the market." "What incident?" I said, which was a stupid thing to say because there was only one incident. Pel gave me a look. "The 3 armed men you punched, one of them turns out to be connected to a smuggling ring the captain has been investigating. Your description of them would help." He paused. He could have sent a letter, but he asked me to come personally, which is, between you and me, very unusual behavior for him. I stared at the book I was not reading. "Tell him I will send a written account," I said. "He said you might say that," Pel said. "He also said to tell you that a written account is fine, but he would prefer to speak with you directly if possible." "Why?" I said. Pel shrugged in a way that suggested he had theories he was choosing not to share. "He is the captain. He does not always explain himself." He tilted his head. "You know, you are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Honestly, someone more like your brother." He said it lightly, but his eyes were watching me carefully. I was quiet for a moment. In the novel, Pel was good at reading people. That was actually why he was useful to Ezrin. I had to be careful. "I am nothing like my brother," I said. That was true. Cassian Vore the character had been crushed and used by Dorian for years. I had no intention of being either of those things. Pel smiled. A real one this time. "Good," he said simply, and left. The next morning I wrote a very detailed account of the 3 men and sent it to the captain's office. I described their clothing, their height, the direction they ran. I was thorough, professional. I signed it Cassian Vore, second son of Vore, which felt extremely awkward, but was technically accurate. I thought that would be the end of it. Ezrin showed up at the estate that evening. My brother Dorian was out, which was lucky, because Dorian's relationship with Ezrin in the novel was hostile from the start, and I did not want to be in the room when those two were in the same space. I met Ezrin in the front sitting room, which was decorated with uncomfortable-looking furniture that was clearly meant to impress rather than to be sat in. Ezrin sat in the uncomfortable chair like it was perfectly normal. I sat across from him and tried not to look like I was panicking. "Your account was thorough," he said. "I tried to be helpful," I said. "The detail about the emblem on the 3rd man's collar was particularly useful." He paused. "Most people would not notice that in the middle of a fight." "I notice things," I said carefully. He looked at me in that direct way he had, not aggressive, just very present, like he was actually paying attention. "You also stepped in to help someone you did not know, against 3 men who were armed. That is not a small thing to do." I looked at my hands. The knuckle had healed fast, which I suspected was one of the benefits of being in a fictional body with apparently good healing. "It seemed wrong not to," I said. Silence. Then, "Yes," he said quietly. Like that was an answer he had not expected but found satisfying. He asked a few more questions about the incident. I answered them honestly. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door, and we stood in the entrance hall for a moment in a silence that was not uncomfortable, which was somehow the most alarming thing that had happened so far. You should not wander the market district alone, he said at the door, particularly in the evenings. Are you telling me to be careful again? I said before I could stop myself. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Yes, he said. I suppose I am. He left. I closed the door. I stood there for a full minute. This was bad. This was very, very bad. I was starting to like him, and we were only in part 2. I had been avoiding Dorian since I arrived in this story. This was not difficult, because Dorian was the kind of person who filled a room with his own sense of importance, and then left before anyone else could say anything. He was rarely home, and when he was, I hid in the library and read actual books instead of staring at them. But on the morning of my 14th day in this world, Dorian walked into my room without knocking. I knew it was him before I turned around. Same face as mine, technically, but worn differently. Where my expression apparently defaulted to quiet and a little sad, his was permanently set to a look that said he was calculating something. "Brother," he said pleasantly, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I said. "We do." He sat down in the chair by the window without being invited. In the novel, Dorian was charming in a surface way, the kind of charming that made you want to agree with him before you figured out you should not. I heard you had a conversation with Ezran Holt. I kept my face still. He had questions about an incident I witnessed. "You witnessed," Dorian repeated, like he found the word funny. "I also heard you stepped into that incident, which is not like you, Kasian." That was the problem. It was not like Kasian. The real Kasian, the one from the novel, had spent years learning to disappear. He did not step into fights. He did not help strangers. He did not talk to the captain of the Imperial Guard. "I was passing by," I said. "It would have been strange to keep walking." Dorian looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled. "Of course," he said warmly. "I am glad you are becoming more engaged with the city. Actually, that is what I wanted to discuss. I have a task for you." And there it was. In the novel, this was the part where Dorian started using Cassian as a tool. He was going to ask me to deliver something, or meet someone, or be seen somewhere. Whatever it was, it would be designed to put Cassian in a position that could later be used as evidence against him. "What kind of task?" I said. "Simple." He reached into his coat and placed a sealed letter on the table near me. "Deliver this to a merchant named Aldous near the East Gate. That is all. No need to open it or ask questions. Just deliver and come home." I looked at the letter. In the novel, one of the things that got Kasian convicted was being seen meeting with people connected to Dorian's criminal network. He never knew what he was carrying. He was never told who these people were. "I am busy this week," I said. Dorian blinked. That was not the answer he had prepared for. "It will only take an hour." I said I am busy. Silence. Dorian looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. He was recalculating. I could see it happening. "Kasian," he said, softer now. "We are family. I am asking for one small thing. And I am saying no." I looked at him directly. "If you need a delivery made, hire someone." Another silence. Longer this time. Then Dorian picked up the letter, put it back in his coat, and stood up. "Of course," he said pleasantly. "I understand. You are busy." He left. I sat very still and breathed. That was the first time anyone in this story had said no to Dorian Vori. I could tell by the way his face had gone very calm and very blank, which in people like him usually means they are genuinely angry but choosing not to show it. I had just made myself a target. The thought was not great, but the alternative was worse. I went to the library and stared at a book for a while. Then Pell showed up again, which I was beginning to suspect was just going to be his thing. "You look even more unhappy than last time," he said cheerfully. "Thank you, Pell," I said. "That is very helpful." He sat across from me and dropped a small wrapped package on the table. "From the captain. He said you mentioned your knuckle was slow to heal, so he sent something from the infirmary." I stared at the package. I said it was fine. He heard fine and decided to send medicine anyway. Pell propped his chin on his hand. He is like that. He notices things people say are fine and then quietly does something about them. It is very annoying, honestly. I once told him I was fine after a 12-hour patrol and woke up the next morning to find he had rescheduled my next shift. He paused. I did not complain. I picked up the package and held it. It was a small thing. just ointment from an infirmary. But it was such a specific kind of thoughtful that I had to work very hard to keep my expression neutral. He really needs to stop doing that, I said. Completely agree, Pell said, in a tone that suggested he agreed with the opposite. Oh, also, the captain was wondering if you might be interested in having dinner sometime this week, he said, and I am quoting him, that he would like to continue the conversation. What conversation? I said. He did not specify. Pell smiled. He rarely specifies. That is another annoying thing about him. I thought about Dorian's expression when I said no. I thought about the letter I had not delivered. I thought about chapter 14 and an execution I was trying very hard to avoid. And then, because I clearly had no survival instinct at all, I said, "Tell him Thursday works." Pell looked genuinely delighted. Excellent, he said, and stood up. I will tell him. Try not to look so terrified about it. I am not terrified, I said. You are a little terrified, he said kindly, and left. He was right. I was a little terrified. But it was the kind of terrified that also felt, underneath, very much like something else. I was not going to name that something else. Not yet. Let me be clear about something. I had read the novel. I knew exactly who Ezrin Holt was as a character. Serious, rule-following, devoted to the Empire with the kind of loyalty that sometimes crosses into stubbornness. In the novel he had about 40 pages of actual personality, and the rest of the time he was just being competent at things, which is admirable but not especially interesting. But the man sitting across from me at a very quiet table in a very good restaurant was considerably more complicated than 40 pages of competence. You have not touched your food, he said. I am thinking, I said. You do that a lot. He said it without judgment, just as an observation. Is that a problem? No. He picked up his own fork. I find it interesting. I looked at him. Most people find it off-putting. Most people are not very patient, he said simply. I did not have an answer for that, so I ate some of my dinner and tried to organize my thoughts. The thing about Ezrin that the novel had not prepared me for was that he asked questions and then actually listened to the answers. Not in a polite, half-listening way. In a way that made you feel like what you said was going somewhere and being kept. He had asked me, somewhere between the soup and the main course, what I thought of the city. Not a polite question. He had asked specifically what I noticed about it and why. And I had answered honestly, because Cassian's memories gave me context I could not have faked, and because Ezrin's expression when I started talking made it very hard to stop. The East District has been changing, I said. More private guards in the last 2 months. Less city patrol presence. Whatever is happening near the East Gate is being managed privately rather than officially, and that means someone with enough money to replace city services decided they wanted less oversight. Ezrin went very still. What? I said. That is, he said carefully, a very accurate observation. Is it connected to the men from the alley? Silence. He looked at me in a way that was evaluating and something else that I could not quite name. You should not ask questions like that, he said, not harshly, like he was saying it for my protection. I know, I said, but I notice things and sometimes they add up. He set down his fork. Cajun, he said, and the way he said my name did something embarrassing to my chest. There are people in this city who would be unhappy to hear you speaking like this. I know that too. Then why are you saying it to me? Good question. The honest answer was that I trusted him in the way you trust a character who you have watched being good for an entire novel, even when it cost him something. But I could not say that, so I said the second truest thing. Because you are the only person I have met who listens like the answer matters. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right. Your brother sent you somewhere last week and you refused to go. He said it calmly. How do you know about that? I should have been surprised. I was not. You have someone watching the estate. I have someone watching your brother, he said. There was something in that distinction that he meant me to hear. Not your brother and you, just your brother. Cassian, I need to know if you are involved in what Dorian is doing. And there it was. The question the story was built on. I looked at him across the table in a restaurant that had suddenly become very quiet in the way things go quiet when something important is happening. I thought about chapter 14. I thought about the letter I had not delivered. I thought about the way Ezrin had handed me a cloth for my bleeding hand, like it was the most natural thing. No, I said. I am not involved. I have been trying very hard not to be. He looked at me for a long time. I believe you, he said. Just like that? Just like that. He picked up his fork again. Finish your dinner. You have barely eaten. I looked at my plate, then at him. You are very strange for someone who is supposed to be strictly professional, I said. He almost smiled again. That almost smile was going to destroy me. So I have been told. We finished dinner. He walked me back toward the estate district, even though it was out of his way. And when we stopped at the corner where our paths split, he said, "Be careful of your brother, and if anything happens, send for Pell. He will find me." Why would you do that? I asked. Help me, I mean. He looked at me with that direct gaze. Because it is the right thing to do, he said, and then, quieter. And because I think you have been carrying too much alone for a long time. He walked away. I stood on the corner for a full 2 minutes. This man was going to be a serious problem. 3 weeks after the dinner I had decided was a one-time thing, Ezrin had eaten with me 4 more times. To be fair, 2 of those were accidental. One happened because we both ended up at the same tea house, and it would have been rude to leave. One happened because Pell engineered it very obviously, and then pretended he had not. I said nothing about that because Pell had also started bringing me information about the Eastgate situation in a way that was very casual and very clearly deliberate. I liked Pell. He was chaotic in a friendly way, like a helpful disaster. But the situation with Dorian was getting worse. He had tried twice more to get me to do things I was not going to do. Both times I refused. Both times he smiled pleasantly and left. That pleasant smile was more frightening than anger would have been. It meant he was adjusting his plan, and I did not know what the new plan looked like. The morning of day 31, I went to the library and found a note tucked into my usual book. No signature, just a date, a location, and the words, "Be there, or people you have spoken with recently will be implicated instead." I sat with the note for a long time. This was the divergence point. In the novel, this was where Cassian, faced with a threat to someone else, agreed to do what Dorian wanted. He went to the meeting. He was seen there. Everything after that moved fast toward chapter 14. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I went to find Pell. He was in the training yard near the guard quarter, which was not where I would usually go. But I had learned that Pell was usually findable within 3 locations, and the training yard was one of them. He saw me coming, and his expression shifted immediately from relaxed to alert. "What happened?" he said. I handed him the note. He read it. His face did something complicated. "When and where is this?" "Tomorrow evening. An address near the East Gate. That is inside the area we have been watching." He looked up. "Does he know what you have told the captain?" "I do not think so, but he suspects something changed." I looked at my hands. "If I do not go," he said, "people I have spoken with will be implicated." I think he means Ezrin. Pell was quiet. Then, "I am going to take this to the captain now." "I know," I said. "That is why I brought it to you." Pell folded the note and tucked it away. He looked at me with an expression that was more serious than I had ever seen on his face. "You did the right thing," he said. "Whatever happens next, you did the right thing." I nodded. I felt very tired. The next part happened fast, the way bad things tend to. Ezrin came to see me that evening, not for dinner. He came to the estate directly, which had never happened before, and we sat in the uncomfortable front room, and he looked at me in a way that was different from before, more careful, more aware of something. "I read the note," he said. "I know, Cajun." He leaned forward slightly, and the shift was small but noticeable. "I need you to tell me everything you know about what your brother is doing. Not the things you have mentioned carefully. Everything." I looked at him. "If I do that, my brother will know I talked. He will make sure I am blamed for everything he has done. I will not let that happen." "You cannot promise that," I said. "You follow the law. If the evidence points to me, you will follow where it points." He was quiet. "Then, no," he said firmly. "I follow justice. Those are not always the same thing." He met my eyes. "I have been watching this case for 4 months. I know your brother's network. I know what he has built. I have also been watching you for 3 weeks, and I know the difference between you and him." Something in my chest was doing something I was going to firmly ignore. And if you are wrong about me, I am not wrong about you, he said, simply, like it was a fact he had already verified. I told him everything. It took 2 hours. I told him every piece Kasian's memories held, everything I had noticed myself, everything Pell had quietly given me. I told him about the letter I had not delivered, and the note in my book, and the pleasant smile that scared me more than yelling would. Ezrin listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back and was quiet for a moment. You have been building a case, he said. I have been trying to survive, I said. Both things can be true. He stood up. I am going to that location tomorrow evening. Not you. You are going to stay home and stay visible. Is that clear? You cannot order me around, I said. I am asking, he said, which was somehow more effective than ordering. Please. One word, and I completely caved. Fine, I said. I will stay home. He nodded. He moved toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back, and for a moment he looked like he was going to say something that was not professional or official. He said, "Thank you for trusting me." I had no idea what to do with that, so I said, "Do not get hurt tomorrow." He looked at me for a moment. "I will try," he said, and left. I sat in the uncomfortable chair for a long time after he was gone. Everything was about to change. I could feel it. I stayed home. I want to be clear about that. I stayed home exactly as requested. I was visible. I had dinner in the main hall. I read in the library. I was, by any measure, a person who was not doing anything suspicious. Then at 9 in the evening, a servant came to the library and said there had been an incident near the East Gate and Captain Holt had been injured. I was out the door before the sentence was finished. I know. I said I would stay home. But staying home when Ezrin was hurt was physically impossible, and I was not going to apologize for that. Pell met me outside. He had been running, which was not a good sign. "He is okay," he said immediately, because he clearly knew what I was going to ask. "He is okay. It is not serious." "What happened?" "The meeting was a trap. Not for us. For your brother." Pell fell into step beside me as we moved toward the guardhouse. Someone else was at that location who was not supposed to be there. There was a confrontation. The captain got between them, and one of them had a knife. He got hit in the shoulder. I made a sound that I hoped did not reveal too much. "He is asking for you," Pell said, in a very neutral voice that was not neutral at all. "He is asking for me," I repeated. "Specifically," he said, and again I am quoting, "Tell Kasian first." Pell was looking straight ahead, but I could see the edge of a smile. I thought that was worth noting. I did not say anything. I walked faster. Ezrin was in a room at the guardhouse, sitting on a cot with his coat off and his shoulder bandaged. He looked pale in the way people look when they have lost more blood than is comfortable, but not enough to be truly frightening. When I came through the door, he looked up and something in his face settled. "You came," he said. "Of course I came," I said, and I sat down on the stool near the cot and looked at his shoulder with the kind of focus I needed to stay calm. Pell said it was not serious. "It is not," he said. "I have had worse." "That is not comforting information." "No," he admitted. "I suppose not." I looked at him properly. He looked tired. Not just physically tired, but the kind of tired that comes from carrying something for a long time. "Did you catch my brother?" I asked. "Not tonight." He shifted carefully. He was not at the location. Someone else was there instead. Someone who works for him. They were meeting with a third party we did not know about. He paused. "It is more complicated than we thought." "It is always more complicated than anyone thinks," I said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes." He looked at me. "Are you all right? You are the one who was stabbed." "I know," he said. "I am asking about you anyway." I pressed my hands together in my lap and looked at them. "I am fine," I said, which was Kasian's version of, "I am managing, but I do not know for how much longer." "Kasian." His voice was quiet. "Look at me." I looked at him. "You have been handling this alone for a long time," he said, "before you came to Pell. Before any of this. You figured out what your brother was doing and you said nothing and carried it alone. Why?" I was quiet for a moment. The honest answer was complicated. The short answer was, because I did not think anyone would believe me over Dorian. Something shifted in his expression. It was not pity. It was something more complicated and more serious. "I believe you," he said. "I believed you before you showed me anything. I want you to understand that. I had been holding things tightly inside my chest for 31 days, and that sentence was a very inconvenient time for them to try to get out. I focused very hard on staying calm." "Why?" I said, which came out quieter than I meant. He reached out slowly and put his hand over mine on my knee, just held it there. "Because you show up," he said. "When it would be easier to look away, you do not. That tells me more than any report." I stared at his hand over mine. It was warm. I had not expected that. "You are very different from how I expected," I said without thinking. "How did you expect me?" "More," I stopped. "More strictly official. More by the rules. I follow rules when they serve people," he said. "When they do not, I follow the people." A pause. "You are a person I want to follow, if that is not too strange a thing to say." It was an extremely strange thing to say, and also one of the most beautiful things anyone had ever said to me, and I was going to need a moment. "It is a little strange," I said. "I will accept that." He did not move his hand. We sat there for a while in the quiet guardhouse room. Outside, I could hear Pell pretending very loudly to be busy with paperwork. Pell was not subtle. He was lovable, but not subtle. "Get some rest," I finally said. "You should too," he said. He let go of my hand slowly. "Kajin, whatever happens with Dorian, you will not be alone in it." I stood up. I needed to stand up before I did something I could not take back. "Okay," I said. It was a small word, but I meant all of it. I left. Pell was waiting in the hallway, very innocently reviewing documents. "Not a word," I said. "I said nothing," he said cheerfully. "You are thinking very loudly," I said. He grinned. "I am just happy for my captain," he said. "He has been professionally excellent for years. It is nice to see him be a person for a change." I walked past him before my face could do anything I did not want it to do. Outside, the air was cool, and I stood in it for a while. My hand was still warm where his had been. Chapter 14 felt very far away tonight. I was going to fight very hard to keep it that way. I had 1 week before the convergence point. In the novel, Chapter 14 happened at the end of month 3. I was now at month 3, week 3. I had changed enough things that the novel's exact timeline was probably different, but some things in stories have a shape that pulls events toward them no matter how much you push back. A story wants to finish itself, and this story had always been about a Vori twin taking the fall. I just needed to make sure it was the right one. The problem was Dorian knew something had shifted. I saw it in small ways. The servants reported to him more carefully when I was around. He started appearing in rooms I was using, not confrontationally, just present, watching. When he spoke to me, he was pleasant in that calculated way, but his eyes were doing something different than his mouth. On the morning of day 78, he came to breakfast. We never had breakfast together. This was new. "I have been thinking," he said, pouring tea like we did this every day, "about how little time we have spent together recently. We are brothers, Cassian. We should be closer." "We have never been close," I said. He set down the teapot. "No," he agreed, "but that could change." He looked at me with something that almost looked sincere. Almost. "I know I have not been good to you." I looked at him. "I used you," he said, "when we were younger. I used the fact that you were quiet and people overlooked you. I put things on you that were not yours to carry." He paused. "I want to be better than that." In the novel, this was not in the story. Dorian never admitted anything. He never attempted this kind of conversation, which meant this was not Dorian being honest. This was Dorian having figured out that his other tools were not working and reaching for a different one. "What do you want?" I said. He looked surprised, just for a moment, that I had gone straight to it. Then he smiled, a real one this time, the kind that meant I had done something he found interesting. "I want your help," he said, genuinely, "not to carry things blindly, as a partner." "In what?" "In what I have been building." He leaned forward. "It is not what you think. The men near the East Gate, the network, it is not crime, Cassian. It is survival. The people in power in this empire are not kind to families like ours. I have been building something that ensures we are not subject to them. I listened to the whole speech. It was very good. In another version of me, in another version of this story, it might have worked. The part about families like ours, about survival, about power, those were real things, real problems, real fears. He was wrapping something real around something false, and it was skillfully done. And the people who have been hurt by what you have built? I asked. He paused. Just briefly. There is always cost. The man from the alley, I said. He was one of yours. He was shaking down a market seller who could not pay. That is not survival. That is what you are doing to survive being done to someone else. Silence. You have changed, Dorian said. Not pleasantly, just factually. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I was always like this and you never looked close enough to see it. He sat back. The pleasant expression was gone. I am going to ask you one more time, he said quietly. Stand with me or stand against me. There is no middle. Then I stand against you, I said, because the middle was never real. He stood up. For a moment, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, something sadder than anger. I did not want it to be like this, he said. I know, I said. I believe you. I still think you are wrong. He left. I sat at the breakfast table and breathed. Then I sent Pell a message. The meeting that afternoon with Ezrin and Pell was fast and serious. I told them what Dorian had said. Ezrin listened with his hands folded on the desk, expression very still. He is going to move soon, Ezrin said. He knows we are watching him. He was testing you to see if you could be turned. He will not be patient anymore, I agreed. He will want to act before you have enough to hold him, which means he will try to use you, Pell said, even without your agreement. He will create evidence. I know. I looked at Ezrin. There is something I did not tell you before. I was afraid of how it would look. I paused. There is a letter. Dorian left a copy of something in my room 3 weeks ago. I do not know if it was deliberate or a mistake, but it connects me to one of his early operations. It was before I arrived, before I refused him, but on paper it will not look like that. Ezrin looked at me carefully. You have been holding this for 3 weeks. I did not know if telling you would make things worse. Show me, he said. I showed him. Pell took the letter and examined it. Ezrin read it twice. Then he sat back and looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. Thank you for showing me this now, he said. You are not going to ask why I waited? No, he said, because I understand why you waited. You were not sure how much to trust me. A pause. Do you trust me now? Yes, I said, simply, because it was true. He nodded. Something in his eyes was warm in a way his expression did not fully show. Then let me handle this. All of it. You have been carrying this for too long. Ezrin, I said, and the name came out softer than I intended. Be careful. Dorian knows you are close. He is not going to come at you through the front. He looked at me. I know. I am serious, I said. He is going to do something that looks like it is about the case but is actually about you. A pause. You are worried about me, he said. Not like a question. Obviously, I said, which came out with more feeling than I was prepared for. Pell made a small sound. I looked at him. He was examining the ceiling with great interest. Pell, I said. Yes, he said serenely. I need you to look literally anywhere except at me right now. I am looking at the ceiling, he said. Ezrin was not looking at the ceiling. He was looking at me with that expression that was almost a smile, and also something deeper that I had no word for yet. I will be careful, he said quietly. I was going to need chapter 14 to be over soon, because I was running out of ways to keep my feelings from becoming very obvious. The night Dorian made his move, I was ready. I will not pretend I knew exactly how it would happen, but I had spent enough time in this story to feel its shape, and the shape was pulling everything toward this night with the kind of momentum that you either run from or turn around and face. I chose to face it. Dorian's plan was elegant in a terrible way. He had arranged for documents to be found in my room, documents that connected me to his network in a way that was detailed and looked very real. He had also arranged for a witness, someone who would testify to seeing me at a meeting I had never attended. and he had timed all of it for the morning after a public event where he would be visibly in another part of the city. He had not counted on two things. The first was that Pell had been quiet and careful and very good at his job for 3 months, and Pell had found the witness 2 days before and learned, through means I did not ask about in detail, that the witness had been paid. The second was that Ezrin had spent the last 3 weeks building a case that was not about me at all. It was entirely about Dorian, and it was done. The arrest happened in the early morning. I was not there because Ezrin had firmly and clearly told me not to be there, and I had agreed because I was genuinely trying to stop making solo decisions that gave people heart attacks. Pell described it to me afterward. Dorian had been calm, apparently, polite even. He had asked which of the charges were being laid. He had listened to the list. Then he had looked at the arresting officers and said, "Where is my brother?" "Not here," Pell had told him, and Dorian had gone quiet. I heard this and felt something complicated. Not satisfaction, not relief exactly. Something more like grief at the edge of relief. Dorian was terrible. He had done genuinely harmful things to real people. He had spent years treating me as a tool. But he was also, in his way, someone who had been afraid and had chosen a very bad way of dealing with it. I did not forgive him, but I understood something about him that I had not expected to understand. I told Ezrin this, later, sitting across from him in the tea house that had become something close to our place. He listened to all of it without interrupting. "Does it make it harder?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It does not make him right, but it makes it harder." "That is how it should be," he said. "It is easy to dismiss people who hurt you if they are purely evil. It is harder when they are also real." I looked at my tea. "You are surprisingly wise for someone who spent most of this story giving me concerned looks and showing up when I did not ask you to. You never asked, but you always needed it," he said, not unkindly. "You do not know that. I know that you helped a stranger in an alley when it was easier not to. I know you refused your brother 3 times when it would have been safer to comply. I know you brought me information that could have been used against you because you thought it was the right thing to do." He paused. "I know that every time I have shown up when you did not ask, you looked less alone afterward." I stared at my tea very hard. "Kasian," he said. "I am listening," I said, to the tea. "Look at me." I looked up. He was close. We were at a small table, and he was leaning forward slightly, and his eyes were very direct and warm in the way they always were, but now with something else underneath, something that had been building since an alley, and a cloth for a bleeding hand, and 4 months of meals, and conversations, and Pell making moderately obvious interventions. "I would like to say something," he said, "and I would like you to let me finish before you find a way to redirect the conversation." "I do not redirect conversations," I said. "You absolutely redirect conversations," he said. "You are very good at it, I have noticed." I closed my mouth. "I have been watching you for 4 months," he said. "At first because it was my job, then because I wanted to, then because I could not imagine not doing it." He looked at me steadily. "You are the most careful, most stubborn, most quietly brave person I have ever met. You came into a situation that was designed to destroy you, and you refused to be destroyed. I do not know how to not be in your life now. I have tried to think about it, and I cannot find a version of my days that makes sense without you in them." The tea house was very quiet. "That is," I said, and then stopped. "Too much?" he asked. There was something behind his steady expression that was, I realized, a little nervous. Ezrin Holt, steady and serious and competent, was a little nervous. That made me feel something so warm I almost could not hold it. "No," I said. "It is not too much. It is—" I stopped again. "I woke up in a story that was supposed to end badly for me, and then you kept showing up. You were not supposed to save me. The story was not written that way. You were supposed to be on the other side of this. And yet," he said. "And yet," I agreed. "You kept saving the wrong brother." Something crossed his face. Then he laughed. A real one. Not the almost smile. An actual laugh, low and warm. And it changed his entire face into something that was not serious at all, just human and real and impossibly good to look at. "I saved exactly the right brother," he said. "I thought about chapter 14. About an execution that had not happened. about a story I had walked into knowing how it ended, and somehow written a different ending into it. Pell is going to be so smug about this, I said. Pell has been smug about this since week 2, Ezrin said. He told me, and I am quoting him, that I had the face of someone who had already made up his mind and was just waiting for paperwork. I laughed, actually laughed. It surprised me. That sounds exactly like him. He was not wrong, Ezrin said. He reached across the small table and put his hand over mine the same way he had in the guardhouse room, but not the same way at all. More certain this time. More like something decided. Is this all right? I turned my hand over under his so our palms were together. Yes, I said. He looked at me like he had found something he had been looking for without knowing he was looking. Good, he said. Outside the tea house, the city was loud and alive and going about its business with no idea that a story had just finished and started in the same moment. Somewhere across the city, Dorian Vore was in a room where the consequences of his choices were catching up to him. Somewhere nearby, Pell was probably already composing a very smug speech for later. And I was sitting in a tea house holding the hand of a man who had saved me when the story said he should not, and feeling, for the first time since I had woken up in a body that was not mine, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I had come into this story as the one who was meant to fall. I was leaving it, instead, as someone who had been found. Kim Jung-ho opened his eyes and immediately knew something was wrong. The ceiling above him was not the cracked gray plaster of his tiny apartment. It was painted white and carved with gold designs, like something from a historical drama. A chandelier the size of a small car hung above him, glittering with 100 tiny lights. Jun-ho blinked. He blinked again. The chandelier was still there. Okay, he said out loud. Okay, not good. He sat up, and the silk sheets fell from his shoulders. The room around him was enormous. There was a wardrobe tall enough to swallow a person whole, a fireplace with a marble frame, and a window that looked out over a sweeping green garden full of fountains. On the bedside table was a small mirror with a silver handle. Jun-ho picked it up and looked at his reflection. A face looked back at him, a very beautiful face. Dark hair, sharp jaw, cold eyes, lips that naturally turned down at the corners like he was permanently judging everyone. It was a face that could make a person feel like they had done something wrong just by standing near it. It was not his face. Jun-ho dropped the mirror. It did not break because it fell on the thick carpet, which was honestly a relief because he had a feeling things in this room were very expensive. He pressed his palms to his cheeks. The cheeks were real. The hands were real. He stood up on legs that felt like his but were slightly longer, walked to the full-length mirror in the corner, and stared at himself for a long moment. I am Seo Rayan, he said quietly. The name dropped from his lips like he had always known it, like it had been waiting there the whole time, because of course it had. Because Seo Rayan was the villain of Blossoms in Winter, a boys' love novel that Jun-ho had read 3 times. He had cried twice. He had left a 5-star review under a fake username because he was too embarrassed to admit how much he loved it. And now he was inside it. Seo Rayan, cold, cruel, obsessed with the main lead, Shin Do-ha, in the most unhealthy way possible. He spent the entire novel making Do-ha's life difficult, tearing apart every relationship Do-ha tried to build. And at the end of the story, he died alone in a burning building because he had pushed away every single person who might have saved him. It was supposed to be tragic. It was supposed to make the reader feel a complicated mixture of pity and frustration. Jun-ho had felt exactly that, both times he cried. He did not want to feel that from the inside. All right, he said to his reflection. New plan. I am going to fix this. Seo Rayan in the novel had been written as someone with no warmth, no humor, and no awareness of how badly he was handling his emotions. Jun-ho, however, was a very normal 26-year-old who had watched enough drama to know that you do not set fire to someone's career because they smiled at another person. He would simply be better. He would be kind. He would stay away from Shin Do-ha and all three of the male leads who rotated through the story and caused Rayan to spiral every time. He would survive. He would be fine. He would go home eventually, or he would not, but either way he would not die in a burning building. He sat back down on the bed and tried to remember everything he knew about the novel. Shin Do-ha was the main character, sweet, hard-working, completely unaware of how many people were in love with him. Second male lead was Park Yo-han, the childhood friend who had been waiting for years. Third male lead was Lee Tae-sung, the cold and distant professor who slowly melted over the course of 7 chapters. In the novel, Seo Rayan treated all of them like threats and spent an enormous amount of energy trying to keep Do-ha isolated. What a waste of time, Junho thought. What a sad and exhausting way to live. A knock on the door startled him out of his thoughts. "Young Master Rayan," a voice came through the heavy wood. "Your schedule begins in 1 hour. Breakfast is ready." Junho stood up. He smoothed down the silk pajamas he was apparently wearing. He walked to the door and opened it with what he hoped was a calm expression. The servant on the other side was a young woman with a careful face. She gave him a small bow and waited. "Thank you," Junho said. She blinked at him, then she blinked again. Junho had the impression he had just said something very unexpected. Later he would find out that Seo Rayan had never once said thank you to anyone in his life. He followed her down the wide corridor toward the dining room, already working out a new plan in his head. Be polite. Be quiet. Avoid Shin Do-ha. Avoid Park Yo-han. Definitely avoid Lee Tae-sung. Keep his head down. Stay out of the plot entirely. Simple. Very simple. Except Shin Do-ha was already sitting at the breakfast table when Junho walked in, smiling up at him with those warm brown eyes that had been described in the novel as like sunlight after a long winter. And Junho's new heart, which apparently belonged to a villain who had never recovered from that smile, did something completely embarrassing inside his chest. Oh no, he thought. Oh, this was going to be a problem. Junho sat down across from Shin Do-ha and told himself very firmly to act normal. The problem was that Seo Rayan had never acted normal around Do-ha. In the novel, every single scene between them was either filled with cold silence, sharp words, or that specific kind of tension that made the readers scream into their pillows at midnight. Junho had screamed into his pillow too. He had been on the outside then. That had been the appropriate response. Now he was on the inside and screaming was not an option. "You came to breakfast," Do-ha said. His voice was exactly as warm as the novel described, gentle, surprised, like Junho had done something worth noticing just by showing up. "Yes," Junho said. He picked up a piece of toast. Very casual, very normal. "I was hungry." Do-ha stared at him. Junho took a bite of toast. "You have never come to breakfast before," Do-ha said slowly. "In 3 years of living in this house, you have always had your meals sent to your room." Junho thought about this. "I decided to change," he said. Another long silence. "Are you feeling well?" Do-ha asked. "Completely fine," Junho said. This was technically a lie. He was not fine at all. He was sitting in the body of a fictional villain, eating toast across from the male lead of a boy's love novel, trying very hard not to think about the fact that his heart was beating too fast. But physically he was fine, probably. Do-ha looked at him for another moment with an expression that Junho could not quite read. In the novel, Do-ha's expressions were always described through Rayan's obsessive perspective, which meant they were never quite accurate. Rayan had interpreted every small thing Do-ha did as either a rejection or a gift, and had not understood the difference between the two. Junho was going to be more reasonable about this. He poured himself some tea, said good morning to the 2 house staff who hovered near the door, and watched their expressions go through the exact same confusion the servant had shown earlier. Apparently Seo Rayan saying good morning was on the same level as the sky falling. Great. So Rayan had been awful to everyone. Junho had some serious reputation repair to do. "Rayan," Do-ha said after a moment. Junho looked up. He tried to keep his face relaxed. "Thank you," Do-ha said quietly, "for approving my scholarship extension last week. I know you did not have to." Junho searched through the memories that had come with the body. They were not complete memories, more like the outline of a person's life written in faint pencil. He found it, Rayan had approved the extension with a dismissive wave and then spent 2 days angry at himself for doing it. It was nothing, Junho said. It was not nothing, Doha said. It was everything. I just wanted you to know that. Junho looked at him. Doha was looking back with that expression again. The one Junho could not read. Quiet, sincere, a little careful, like he was not sure how this version of Rayan would react. And here was the thing about Junho. He was a normal, sensible person. He had never been in love in a dramatic way. His last relationship had ended because they had disagreed about what time to go to sleep, and both refused to compromise. He was not the type to be swept away by a moment. But something about Doha saying it was everything in that quiet voice made Junho feel like the ground had shifted slightly. He ate the rest of his toast in silence and escaped to his study as quickly as politely possible. The study was full of books and cold light and a large desk that Rayan had apparently used mostly for signing documents with a very intimidating pen. Junho sat in the chair and put his face in his hands. Okay, he said to the empty room. So he is very nice in person. That is fine. I already knew that from the novel. This changes nothing. A knock on the door. He lifted his face. Come in. The door opened and a tall man stepped inside. Junho recognized him immediately from the novel's descriptions. Dark coat, messy dark hair, a jaw that could cut glass. Park Yohan, childhood friend, second male lead. Currently at the beginning of the arc where he came back into Doha's life after 5 years abroad. In the novel, Rayan had treated Yohan like a personal enemy. Yohan looked at Junho with an expression that was somewhere between guarded and curious. I heard you had breakfast downstairs this morning, he said. Word travels fast, Junho said. In this house, yes. Yohan sat in the chair across the desk without being invited, which was either very rude or very familiar. Probably both. You look different. I changed my hair, Junho said. This was a guess. He had no idea if it was true. Yohan looked at his hair. You did not change your hair. Then it must be my energy, Junho said. Yohan stared at him. Then, to Junho's complete shock, he laughed. It was a short laugh, surprised out of him like he had not planned to do it. He covered it quickly with a serious expression, but it was too late. Junho had already seen it. What are you planning, Rayan? Yohan asked. Nothing, Junho said honestly. I am planning absolutely nothing. I am just trying to get through the day. Yohan studied him for a long moment. That is somehow the most suspicious thing you have ever said. Junho decided to change the subject. Is there something you needed? Yohan was quiet. Then he said, Doha seemed happy this morning. Happier than I have seen him in a long time. He paused. I do not know what you did, but try not to undo it. He stood up and walked out, closing the door behind him. Junho sat alone in the study and thought about this for a while. Then he opened the desk drawer, found a notebook, and started writing down everything he remembered about the novel's plot. He needed to stay ahead of the story. He needed to know what was coming. He was on the 3rd page when he realized his hand was writing in Rayan's handwriting, sharp and precise and nothing like his own, and he felt the strangeness of this whole situation settle on him properly for the first time. He was really here. This was really happening. He put the pen down and looked out the window at the garden. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, one day at a time. Lee Tae-sung was not supposed to be this early in the plot. Junho had been in this world for exactly 9 days. He had been very careful. He had been polite to the staff, reasonable at meals, and had successfully avoided 3 situations that in the novel had led to Rayan doing something deeply embarrassing. He had apologized to 2 people Rayan had previously been rude to and watched their faces go through 5 stages of shock. He had started to feel like maybe he had some control over this situation. And then Lee Tae-sung walked into the main hall on a Tuesday afternoon. In the novel, Tae-sung did not appear until chapter 12. Junho was fairly certain the story was still in the early chapters. This was too soon. Something had shifted. Tae-sung was a professor at the nearby university, tall with silver-streaked dark hair that made him look like he had been designed to be intimidating. He was 32 in the novel, brilliant and cold, and carrying around a very large amount of unresolved emotional damage that he processed by working 16 hours a day and refusing to accept help from anyone. He was also, apparently, an old friend of Seo Rayan's family. which meant he had history in this house, which meant Junho was now standing in the main hall trying to look natural, while a man who was supposed to be a romantic interest stared at him with an unreadable expression. "You look well," Taesung said. "Thank you," Junho said. "You also look well." A pause. "You look surprised to see me," Taesung said. "I am always recalibrating my expectations," Junho said, which made no sense but sounded confident. Taesung tilted his head slightly. In the novel, this gesture was described as something he only did when he was genuinely puzzled. "You called me here," he said. Junho's brain went very still and quiet. "I called you here," he repeated. "Your letter arrived last week." Taesung reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "You said you needed to speak with me about something important." Junho stared at the letter. It was Rayan's handwriting. Of course it was, because sometime in the week before Junho had taken over this body, Rayan had apparently written to Taesung and asked him to come. "Right," Junho said. "Yes, the letter." "What did you need to discuss?" Taesung asked. Junho had absolutely no idea. He looked at the letter in Taesung's hand and thought very fast. In the novel, Rayan's interactions with Taesung had all been about leverage. Rayan had known things about Taesung's past and had used that knowledge as a tool. It was one of the less flattering things about Rayan's character, and Junho had found it difficult to read, even when he had sympathy for the villain. He was not going to do that. "I wanted to apologize," Junho said. Taesung went very still. "For things I said to you the last time we met," Junho continued, hoping there had been a last time and that he was characterizing it correctly. "It was not appropriate. I was dealing with things I should not have directed at you." The silence stretched out long enough to become uncomfortable. "You are apologizing," Taesung said. Not a question. More like someone confirming a fact that did not make sense. "Yes." "To me, yes. Seo Rayan," Taesung said, "is apologizing to me. I understand it is unexpected," Junho said. Taesung looked at him for a long moment. Then he walked past Junho toward the sitting room. "I need to sit down," he said. "This has been a very strange Tuesday." Junho followed him into the sitting room. A staff member appeared immediately with tea, which suggested that even the staff were paying close attention to this interaction. Junho accepted a cup and sat across from Taesung and tried to figure out what to do next. "You really have changed," Taesung said after a moment. "People can change," Junho said. "In 9 days?" So Taesung had been tracking the timeline. "Interesting. Doha mentioned that you have been different lately," Taesung continued. He looked at Junho over the rim of his cup with eyes that were sharp and searching. He seemed cautiously hopeful. "It is a new expression for him where you are concerned." Junho felt something pull at him. Cautiously hopeful. That was such an Doha thing to feel. Careful about wanting something good in case it went away. "I do not want to make things harder for him," Junho said. It came out more honest than he intended. Taesung lowered his cup. "That is the first thing you have ever said about Doha that sounds like care rather than possession." Junho looked at his own tea. "I know," he said. He did not explain further. He could not explain further without explaining everything. "And I transmigrated into your friend's villain from a novel I read in my previous life," was not a conversation he was ready to have. Taesung stayed for 2 hours. They talked about things Junho kept careful. The property, the university, a book Taesung had published recently. Normal conversation, civilized. When Taesung left, he paused at the door. "I will come again next week," he said. "If that is acceptable." "Yes," Junho said. Taesung nodded and left. Junho sat in the empty sitting room and thought about the fact that the plot had moved on its own. Taesung arriving early meant the story was accelerating. Something had changed in the timeline, the moment Junho had taken over Rayan's body and started behaving differently. He did not know if that was good or very, very bad. He opened the notebook to a new page and wrote, "The story is shifting. Be careful." Below that, after a moment, Taesung has kind eyes under the cold ones. He closed the notebook before he could write anything else embarrassing. "Are you sick?" Junho looked up from the book he was reading. Park Yohan was standing in the doorway of the library, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who had been thinking about something for too long and finally decided to say it out loud. "Good morning," Junho said. "Are you sick?" Johan said again. "Or cursed? Or have you hit your head?" "None of those things," Junho said. "Then explain what is happening." Junho put the book down. He had been reading it for 40 minutes and had retained approximately nothing because he had been thinking about the fact that the plot was moving faster than expected and he had no idea what was coming next. Having Johan here was actually a relief, even if the conversation was going to be difficult. "What specifically would you like explained?" Junho asked. Johan walked into the library and sat on the windowsill, which was a slightly dramatic place to sit but suited him. In the novel, Johan had been written as someone with a deep undercurrent of feeling that he showed very rarely and protected very carefully. His humor was dry, his loyalty was absolute, and he had spent 5 years traveling to try to get over caring about the people in this house, and it had not worked at all. "You said good morning to Minjae yesterday," Johan said. Minjae was apparently one of the staff members. He almost fell down the stairs. "That seems like a design flaw in the stairs," Junho said. Johan stared at him. "You made a joke." "I make jokes. Seo Rayan does not make jokes." Junho thought about how to respond to this. The problem with pretending to be a villain who had transformed was that people kept noticing the transformation and wanting explanations. He could not exactly say he had never been Rayan in the first place. Maybe Seo Rayan got tired of being the way he was, Junho said carefully. Johan was quiet for a moment. Outside the library window, the garden was full of morning light and the sound of water from one of the fountains. It was, Junho thought, a very nice place to live. He wished he had been transmigrated into the role of someone who could enjoy it without all the villain baggage. "Doha likes this version of you," Johan said. His voice was neutral, very carefully neutral. In the novel, Johan had spent a long time being neutral about things that were not actually neutral to him. "That is good," Junho said. "Is it?" Again, not a question. Junho looked at him. "Yes," he said firmly. "Johan, Doha being happy is good. That is just true. It does not need to be more complicated." Something moved through Johan's expression too fast for Junho to catch. He turned to look out the window. "You know what the strangest part is?" Johan said. "Tell me. You are kinder now. You are warmer. You are making actual human conversation." He paused. "And somehow, because of all of that, Doha is spending more time near you than he ever did when you were following him around making his life difficult." Junho considered this. He had noticed it too. Doha had started appearing in the same rooms as Junho, with a kind of casual frequency that felt deliberate but looked accidental. Stopping by the library to borrow a book, asking Junho's opinion about something at dinner. Small, quiet things. "People move toward warmth," Junho said. "Yes," Johan said. "They do." He said it like it was a conclusion he had reached about something other than the conversation. A long silence. "Johan," Junho said. "What? Are you in love with Doha?" The silence that followed this was very loud. Johan turned from the window and looked at Junho with an expression that was close to alarm. "What kind of question is that?" "A direct one," Junho said. "I am trying direct these days." "I can see that." Johan looked away again. "What does it matter to you?" "It matters because you have been standing on that windowsill for 10 minutes, looking sad about something, and I think you deserve to have someone ask." Another silence, softer this time. "You cannot tell me you care about my feelings," Johan said. "You spent 3 years treating everyone in this house like furniture." "I know," Junho said. "I am sorry for that, genuinely." Johan turned to look at him. Really look at him. The kind of look that was measuring something. "Who are you?" Johan asked quietly. And for a moment Junho almost told him. He almost said, "My name is Kim Junho, and I am from a different world, and I read about all of you in a novel, and I liked you very much actually, Johan. I thought you deserved better than the ending you got." Instead he said, "Someone trying to do better." Johan looked at him for another long moment. Then he got off the windowsill. "Doha has a dinner with his scholarship committee tonight," he said. "He is nervous. He will probably not say so." "Thank you for telling me," Junho said. Johan nodded and left. Junho sat in the library and thought about the fact that Johan, who in the novel never trusted anyone easily, had just told him something true and personal. He had offered it like a small gift, like he was testing the ground and finding it more solid than expected. This was both heartening and terrifying because it meant people were starting to trust this version of Rayan, which meant when the plot went wrong, as it inevitably would, they were going to be hurt by it. Junho was going to have to work very hard to make sure the plot did not go wrong. He picked up his book again and stared at the page without reading anything, and thought about Doha being nervous tonight and whether it would be overstepping to say something encouraging at dinner. The answer was probably no. He would do it anyway. On day 23, Junho found the journal. It was tucked behind a loose stone in the wall of Rayan's study, which Junho had discovered by accident when he leaned against the wall looking for a book on the top shelf, and the stone moved. Behind it was a small hollow space, and inside the space was a slim leather journal with a lock that opened easily, as if it had given up on keeping its secrets. Junho sat at the desk and opened it. The first entry was dated 7 years ago. Rayan had been 18. He started reading. He read for 2 hours and he did not stop until he reached the final entry, which was dated 3 weeks before Junho had arrived in this body. By the end of it, his hands were very still on the desk, and he was staring at the opposite wall and thinking about how completely he had misunderstood Seo Rayan. The novel had written Rayan as a villain, cold, obsessive, destructive, someone whose love was possession and whose fear came out as cruelty. And all of that was true, in the way that the sharp edge of something is true without telling you about the shape of the whole thing. The journal was the whole thing. Rayan had known he was difficult. He had known it and had hated it and had not been able to stop. He had written about his own behavior with a clarity that was painful to read, each entry a small record of something he had done wrong and the reasons he had not been able to do it differently. He had written about Doha not as a possession but as someone he was terrified of losing, terrified in the way that made him hold too tight and not tight enough at the same time. He had written, "I do not know how to love without making it into something sharp. I think I learned this from somewhere I cannot remember. I am trying to learn differently, but I cannot find where to begin." Junho sat with that for a long time. He had come into this body assuming Rayan was the villain, and he was the reasonable replacement. But Rayan had been a real person, complicated and damaged and genuinely trying in the only way he knew how. Junho had not replaced him. He had stepped into the middle of a life that was already in pain and started acting like a different person in it. And everyone had noticed the difference, and they had all moved closer. Which meant, Junho realized with a slow and terrible clarity, that when Seo Rayan came back, if he came back, everything Junho had built would be waiting for him. He closed the journal. He sat in the quiet study. Then he took out his own notebook and wrote, "I do not think I am supposed to stay here forever. I think I might be here to start something that Rayan will have to finish." He stared at that sentence. Below it he wrote, "This is either very meaningful or very inconvenient, possibly both." At dinner that evening, Doha sat next to him. This was new. For the first 3 weeks, Doha had sat across from him, which was the safe distance. Now he was close enough that Junho could see the ink on his fingers from studying, close enough that when Doha reached for the bread, their hands almost touched. "You seem distracted," Doha said. "I found something today," Junho said. "That changed how I understand things." Doha looked at him. Good change or bad change? Junho thought about Rayan's handwriting filling page after page. Honest and sad and reaching for something better. "Complicated," Junho said, "but I think it is important." Doha nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. Doha had always been written as someone who could feel the weight in a word without needing to know the details. "Can I ask you something?" Junho said. "Yes, before things were better between us." He was careful about the phrasing. "Did you ever think Rayan could change?" Doha was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I always thought so. That was the problem, actually. I kept believing it, and then things would go badly, and I would try to stop believing it. But I could never quite manage to stop." Junho looked at him. "Why?" Doha smiled a little. "Small and quiet and very honest. Because sometimes, in between all the difficult parts, I would see something real in him, like a light through a crack. And it made me think that if the crack got wider, the whole room might be full of it. Junho felt something shift in his chest. Not the borrowed heart beating too fast. Something steadier than that. Something that felt like it belonged to him. That is a kind way to see someone, he said. You say that like it is unusual, Doha said. It is, Junho said. It really is. Later that night, lying in Rayon's bed and staring at Rayon's ceiling, Junho thought about cracks and light and a person learning to love without making it into something sharp. He thought, I have to help Rayon come back to this, whatever this is. I have to leave it somewhere he can find it. He picked up the notebook and started writing. Not the plot notes, not the tracking of events. Something different, something like a letter. He wrote, You are not who the story says you are. You are more than that. People can see it. Look at them and let them. He put the pen down. He hoped with everything he had that whoever read that next would understand. The thing nobody told you about being a transmigrated soul in a boy's love novel was that eventually the romantic tension would become a problem you had to actually deal with. Junho had managed 3 weeks of careful distance. He had been warm but not too warm, attentive but not obvious, and had avoided any moment that felt like it was going somewhere that would make his pulse do complicated things. He was very proud of himself. Then the three of them were in the same room at the same time for the first time, and all his careful plans became absolutely useless. It happened at a reception Junho had not known about until that morning. One of Ryan's family associates was hosting it at the house, and Junho had been told by a very apologetic staff member that he was expected to attend. He had dressed in the clothes that had been laid out for him, which were well-fitted and severe and very Ryan, and had walked into the main reception room, where 40 people were drinking wine and talking about important things. Doha was there because he worked for one of the event's sponsors. He was wearing a soft blue suit that made him look like someone had designed him specifically to make Junho's borrowed heart embarrassing. Johan was there because apparently he knew everyone and everyone knew him. He was talking to a group of people near the window and laughing at something, and he was, objectively, very hard not to look at when he laughed. Taesung was there because one of the university donors was attending, and he had been asked to represent the academic program. He was standing slightly apart from everyone else with a glass of wine and the expression of someone doing elaborate mental math. And Junho, standing in the doorway, took one look at all three of them and thought, I am going to have to be very mature about this. Doha saw him first and smiled. That warm, specific smile that Junho was starting to be able to read now. It meant, I am glad you are here. Johan looked up a moment later and raised one eyebrow, which meant, this is going to be an interesting evening. Taesung looked at him last and tilted his head slightly, which apparently was just a thing Taesung did when he was paying full attention to something. Junho walked into the room with what he hoped was a calm expression and immediately started managing distances. He spoke to Doha about the event. He greeted Johan and deflected 3 questions about his recent behavior with varying levels of success. He found himself next to Taesung at the drinks table, and they had a quiet conversation about a historical exhibition that neither of them had been to, but both found interesting based on the catalog. At some point, he ended up in a corner with all 3 of them at once, and the conversation was fine. It was actually fine. It was warm and funny, and Johan made a joke about university politics, and Taesung said something dry and precise that made Junho laugh genuinely, and Doha was looking between all of them with something bright in his expression. This is new, Doha said. What is? Junho asked. All of us talking, like this. He gestured slightly at the space between them. It is nice. Johan looked at Junho. Junho looked at Johan. They both knew what this had been like before. It is, Johan said, and his voice was sincere. Taesung looked into his wineglass and said nothing, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Later, when the reception had thinned out and people were leaving, Junho stepped out into the garden for air. The night was clear and cool, and the fountains were lit up, and it was the kind of moment that in a novel would have significant music playing under it. Footsteps behind him. He turned. All 3 of them had followed him out. This is not a coincidence, Junho said. We want to ask you something, Johan said. Junho looked at them, 3 people who the novel had written as love interests for Shin Doha, standing in a row in a moonlit garden, looking at the villain's face that Junho was currently wearing. "Go ahead," he said. "Who are you?" Doha asked, quietly, seriously, not confrontational, genuinely asking. Junho was very still. "What do you mean?" he said. "You are different," Doha said. "You have been different since, I am not sure exactly when, but you are not the same as before. And I do not mean that badly. He paused. "I want to understand." Taesung said. Something shifted, significantly, and quickly. Johan said nothing. He was just watching. Junho looked at the three of them. He thought about all the careful things he could say, all the explanations that would make sense within the logic of this world. He thought about Rayon's journal, and the crack, and the light. Then he said, "Something changed in me. I cannot explain it well, but I am not who I was. I am trying to be something better than that. And whatever happens, I want things to go well for all of you." The silence that followed was long and complicated, and full of things that none of them were saying yet. Then Doha said, very softly, "Okay. Just okay. Like that was enough for now." Junho breathed. Johan looked up at the sky. Taesung looked at his shoes. Doha looked at Junho with those warm brown eyes and did not look away. And Junho stood in a moonlit garden in someone else's body and felt, for the first time since arriving here, like he might actually be doing something right. He also felt, somewhat more worryingly, like he was developing feelings for at least one person in this garden, and possibly all three, and this was a complication he had absolutely not planned for. One problem at a time. It started with a letter. Not a good letter. A letter from someone who had known the original Rayan very well and wanted to use that knowledge to cause problems. Junho found it on the study desk on day 31, addressed to Rayan, sealed with a black wax mark that looked like it was trying very hard to be threatening. He opened it. Inside was a very precise threat. The writer, who signed only with initials, claimed to have information about something Rayan had done 2 years ago. Something that Rayan had kept secret. Something that, if revealed, would destroy not only Rayan's reputation but would also affect Doha directly, tangling him in a scandal that had nothing to do with him. Junho read the letter twice. He sat back in the chair. In the novel, this letter had arrived and Rayan had responded to it by spiraling. He had kept it secret, tried to handle it alone, made a series of bad decisions, and the whole thing had collapsed into the burning building arc, the villain's downfall. Junho did not want that. He also did not know exactly what Rayan had done. The letter referred to the incident at the Foundation Gala, and the Rayan memories he had were incomplete. He had flashes, a party, raised voices, something broken, but not enough to understand what had actually happened. He took the letter to Johan. This surprised Johan enough that he sat down without Junho having to ask. He read the letter carefully. Then he read it again. "You are telling me," Johan said. "Yes," Junho said. "You are not handling this alone and telling no one." "No," Junho said. "That seems like exactly the wrong approach." Johan looked at him for a long moment. 2 years ago at the Foundation Gala, he said slowly, something happened between Rayan and a man named Jung Wonil. Wonil had been pressuring Doha about something and Rayan confronted him. Loudly, there were witnesses. Wonil left the organization shortly after. He paused. "Is that the incident?" Junho thought about this. Rayan defended Doha? In the most aggressive and embarrassing way possible, yes. Made a scene. Said things that were hard to walk back. Wonil has been quiet since then, but he has also been waiting. Junho put his hand over his mouth and thought for a moment. The thing that had seemed like a villain's possessive behavior had been, underneath it, someone trying to protect someone they loved and not knowing how to do it cleanly. And now that messy protection was coming back as a weapon. Doha should know, Junho said. Johan's eyes widened slightly. Rayan has spent 2 years making sure Doha did not know. That was the wrong choice, Junho said. Doha deserves to know what happened and why. He can handle it. Johan stared at him. You are suggesting we tell Doha that Rayan caused a significant scandal on his behalf 2 years ago without telling him? Yes. Doha is going to feel guilty. Probably. And then he will feel cared for once he understands the context. And then we can deal with Wonil together, instead of Rayan, instead of me, handling it alone. and making it worse. Johan sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "When did you become the sensible one?" he said. "I have always been the sensible one," Junho said. "The packaging was just misleading." They told Doha that evening. Taesung was also there because Taesung had arrived for his weekly visit, and Junho had decided that more people knowing was better than fewer. Doha listened to the whole thing without interrupting. His expression moved through several things that Junho could now read fairly well: surprise, confusion, something tight and sad, and then, quietly, understanding. "He did that for me?" Doha asked. "Yes," Johan said. Doha was quiet. He looked at Junho with an expression Junho could not fully interpret. "Why did you not tell me before?" he asked. Junho thought about Rayan's journal, about the entry that said, "I do not know how to let people carry things with me." "Because asking for help felt like weakness," Junho said. "That was wrong. I understand that now." Doha nodded slowly. Then, "What do we do about Wonil?" Taesung said, "I know Wonil. I can have a conversation with him that makes certain his information will not damage anyone." Johan said, "And I have some history with his former associates that makes his position less secure than he thinks." Junho looked at both of them. "You do not have to do this," he said. "We are doing it," Johan said, simply, like it was obvious. "You are not alone in this," Doha said. And he looked at Junho, and his voice was so direct and warm that Junho felt it like something physical. It was handled in 3 days. Taesung and Johan between them removed the threat so thoroughly and quietly that Wonil's letter became a piece of paper that meant nothing. The incident stayed buried. Doha was safe. Afterward, when the 4 of them were sitting in the main room with tea going cold on the table, Johan said, "We should probably talk about the fact that we all just worked together without arguing once." "We argued about the tea," Taesung said. "That was about temperature preferences," Johan said. "That does not count." Doha was smiling. Junho looked at all of them and felt something he did not have a clean word for. Something like belonging, something like warmth, something that felt, he thought, like the beginning of a very different ending from the one the novel had written. He was very careful not to say any of this out loud because he would absolutely cry, and he was trying to maintain some dignity. On day 45, Junho woke up and knew something was different. It was not anything he could see. The room was the same. The gold ceiling was the same. The chandelier was the same. But there was something in the air that felt like the moment before a door opens, that particular stillness. He got up slowly. He dressed carefully. He stood at the window for a long time looking at the garden. He had been thinking about this for days, about what it would mean when his time here ended, about Rayan, somewhere, waiting to come back into his own life, about the people here, Doha, Johan, Taesung, who had opened up to someone who was not quite who they thought he was. He went to the study. He sat at the desk. He took out the notebook and opened it to the letter he had started writing. He had been adding to it in small pieces, explanations, observations, things he had learned about all of them that Rayan might not have known. Things he wanted Rayan to know. He wrote now more clearly, more directly. He wrote about Johan's laugh, about Taesung's tilted head attention, about Doha's specific kind of warmth that came from someone who had been given reasons to close off, but had chosen not to. He wrote, "They all moved toward you when you were kind. They were always capable of it. They were waiting for you to be capable of it too." He wrote, "You are capable of it. I know because I lived in your life for 45 days, and I found room there for all of it." He wrote, "Please do not set any buildings on fire. I mean this literally, and also in the metaphorical sense." He sat back and looked at what he had written. Then he added, "You did good things. Remember that. You protected Doha before I arrived. That was yours. I just helped people see it." He closed the notebook and put it back in the hollow behind the stone. Then he went downstairs. The morning felt important in the way that important mornings sometimes did, quiet and full of weight. Doha was in the garden when Junho found him, sitting on a stone bench near the largest fountain, reading something. He looked up when Junho came through the glass door. "Early morning," Doha said. "Could not sleep," Junho said. He sat next to him on the bench. Not across, next to. close enough to feel the warmth of another person. Do-ha put his book down. They both looked at the fountain. I want to tell you something, Junho said. Okay, Do-ha said. Junho thought about how to say this without saying too much, without giving away things that would not make sense, without making it a goodbye that Do-ha would not understand the reason for. Whatever happens, he said carefully, things are going to be different from before. The way things have been these past weeks, that is the way things should be. You deserve people around you who see you clearly and treat you well, and I, Rayan, wants that for you. Even if it sometimes does not come out right, even if it is imperfect, the wanting is real. Do-ha was very quiet for a moment. Are you going somewhere? He asked. Junho looked at him. I might change a little again, he said. And if I do, be patient. There is something real underneath everything. Do not give up on it. Do-ha turned to look at him. His face was open and a little worried and very warm. You are being strange, he said. I am almost always strange, Junho said. That is true, Do-ha said, but in a new way today. Junho smiled. He could not help it. Do-ha looked at him, and something moved through his expression. Quiet, steady, like the sun coming fully over the horizon. Whatever changes, Do-ha said. What matters to me is right here. This. He gestured between them. This is what I want to keep. Junho felt the fullness of that press against him. He wanted to say, me too. He wanted to say, I hope Rayan knows what he has here. He wanted to say, I will miss this very much. Instead he said, thank you for believing in people. Do-ha looked at him. Thank you for becoming someone worth believing in. They sat together in the garden until the morning was fully bright. Yohan joined them eventually, and then Taesung appeared at the glass door and shook his head at all of them sitting on garden benches like they had always done this, and then sat down on the steps because there was no more room. Junho sat in the middle of all of it and thought, okay, if it ends today, it ends with this, with sunlight and these people and something that got fixed enough to hold. That evening, when he lay down in Rayan's bed, he held the stillness around him and thought about Kim Junho, the person he actually was, somewhere out there. He thought about the cracked ceiling of his tiny apartment. He thought about his 5-star review left under a fake username. He thought, if you are reading this, Rayan, the real story is better than the one they wrote about you. He closed his eyes. When the world shifted, it was gentle, like a tide going out. He woke up somewhere bright. Not the gold ceiling, his own ceiling, gray and cracked and very familiar. His own hands, smaller than Rayan's, holding nothing. He sat up, his apartment, his body, his life. He exhaled a breath that felt like it had been held for 45 days. Then he reached for his phone. He opened the Notes app. He typed, as fast as he could before any of it faded. Everything. Every detail. Every person. The garden in the morning. The crack in the light. What Do-ha said on the bench. He typed until his hands were tired. Then he leaned back against the wall of his tiny apartment and smiled at his cracked ceiling. Good luck, he said quietly, to Rayan, to all of them. Somewhere in a world he had left behind, someone who looked like him was sitting down at a breakfast table, and maybe this time, they would not have to learn everything from the beginning. Maybe there was a notebook in a study with a loose stone in the wall, and inside it was a letter, and inside the letter was a map to somewhere better. Junho hoped very much that it was enough. He thought, based on everything he had seen, that it probably was. After all, the light was already through the crack. Someone just had to be willing to open the door. Kai had a list. Number 1, make Ren and Seo meet at the school festival. Number 2, pretend to be mean so Seo runs to Ren for comfort. Number 3, stay invisible, do the job, and go home. Simple, clean, emotionless. Except the universe clearly did not get the memo. It started on a Tuesday. Kai was sitting in the corner of the school cafeteria, eating his lunch in peace. Or what should have been peace. Except the boy sitting directly across from him kept dropping his chopsticks, over and over. Clatter, pick up, clatter, pick up. Kai looked up. Seo Jingyo was staring at him with wide, panicked eyes. He had soft brown hair, a sweater 2 sizes too big, and the general energy of a puppy who had just walked into a glass door. "Sorry," Seo whispered. "I keep dropping them." "I noticed," Kai said flatly. Seo smiled anyway. Big, warm, completely unbothered by Kai's tone. "I'm Seo Jinho. I just transferred here. Are you in class 2B? "No." "Oh." Seo blinked. "Then why are you sitting at the class 2B table?" Kai looked at the table, then at his tray, then at the tiny handmade sign that said class 2B that he had absolutely not noticed when he sat down. He picked up his tray and left without a word. Behind him, he heard Seo giggle. Kai's eye twitched. This was fine. This was completely fine. He just needed to get Seo to meet Ren Han, the most popular boy in school, the golden boy with the warm smile and the perfect hair, that probably stayed perfect even during typhoons, and then Kai's job here was done. Kai had been watching Ren for 3 weeks now, gathering information like a very tired and underpaid detective. Ren liked early mornings, hated loud noises, volunteered at the library on Wednesdays, and apparently had the ability to make every person in a room feel like they were the most important person alive. Kai, on the other hand, had the ability to make people feel like they owed him money. It was fine. It was a gift. He found Seo again after school, standing at the gate with a campus map, turning it upside down, then sideways, then upside down again. Kai stopped walking. He should keep going. He really should. "You're reading it wrong," he said. Seo turned the map right side up and beamed. "Oh, that makes so much more sense. Thank you, Kai." "Kai." Seo repeated his name like he was tasting it. "That's a cool name. Very sharp, like a knife or something." Kai stared at him. Was that a compliment? Absolutely. Seo nodded very seriously. Kai had been called intimidating, cold, strange, and, once, memorably, the human version of a thunderstorm. Nobody had ever called him sharp like a knife and meant it warmly. He did not know what to do with that. "The library is that way," Kai said, pointing. "Ren Han volunteers there on Wednesdays. He can help you find your classrooms." Seo tilted his head. "How do you know where the library is if you're not in class 2B? "I know where everything is." "That's either really impressive or a little scary." "Both," Kai said, and walked away. He told himself that the small smile on his face was because the plan was working. Seo would find the library. He would find Ren. They would fall in love on schedule, and Kai could go back to eating his lunch at an empty table and not having conversations with boys who dropped their chopsticks. Behind him, he heard Seo call out, "I'll save you a seat tomorrow, at the right table this time." Kai kept walking. He absolutely did not slow down when he heard that. The next morning, Kai arrived at school and stood outside the cafeteria for approximately 4 minutes before he went inside and sat, for reasons he refused to examine, at a table near the windows. Seo was already there. He had saved a seat, with a little sticky note that said, "For the knife-named boy." Kai sat down. He did not say anything. He opened his lunchbox and started eating. Seo smiled at him like Kai had just done something very sweet. This, Kai thought, was going to be a problem. The thing about being the villain is that you have to commit. Kai had done his research. The best way to push 2 people together was to give them a common enemy, and the best common enemy was someone who could be cold and difficult, and just annoying enough to make the hero feel protective. Kai was built for this role. He had the face for it. The problem was Seo Jinho. Specifically, the problem was that Seo Jinho refused to be scared of him. On Wednesday, Kai walked Seo to the library. Not on purpose. They were just going in the same direction, totally different reasons. Kai needed a book, sure. Ren was at the front desk, sorting returned books with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. He looked up when they walked in, and his entire face changed, like sunlight coming through a window. That was the thing about Ren Han. He made everyone feel like they mattered. "You must be the transfer student," Ren said, smiling at Seo. "I heard you got lost 3 times today." Seo laughed. 4, actually. I also ended up in the faculty bathroom. Ren laughed too. It was a good laugh, warm and real. Kai stood to the side and watched. Good. This was good. The plan was working. So why did he feel like someone had put a small rock in his shoe? Is this your friend? Ren asked, looking at Kai. Seo nodded cheerfully. That's Kai. He's very sharp, like a knife. Ren blinked. Then looked at Kai with something like curiosity. Kai, I've seen you around. You're in class 3A, right? You always eat alone. Kai did not like being observed. I like eating alone. He also saved me from reading a map upside down, Seo added, and he told me to come find you. Ren's eyebrows went up. He looked at Kai differently now, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You sent him to me? He needs help navigating, Kai said flatly. You volunteer here. It made sense. Ren studied him for a moment. Then he smiled slowly. Sure. Makes sense. Something about the way he said it made Kai uncomfortable. He left quickly and spent the walk back to his classroom telling himself this was fine. Phase 1 was complete. Seo and Ren had met. They had laughed together. Ren had that look he got when he liked someone. It was all going perfectly. He should feel satisfied, like a chess player who had moved his pieces well. Instead, he felt strangely hollow, like he had given something away without meaning to. At lunch the next day, Seo came and sat next to him again. Ren was with him this time, tray in hand, looking at Kai with that same curious expression. Can we sit here? Ren asked. It's a free country, Kai said. They sat. All three of them ate in silence for about 30 seconds before Seo said, Kai, what's your favorite color? And the entire dynamic shifted because apparently Seo treated lunches like job interviews, asking questions rapid fire. Favorite color, favorite season, most embarrassing moment, ideal weekend. And both Kai and Ren ended up answering without realizing they were doing it. Kai said his favorite color was gray. Seo said that was very on brand. Ren said his was blue, and Seo clapped like this was the best news he had ever received. Why are you so excited about that? Ren asked, laughing. Because blue is calming. It means you're a peaceful person. Kai is gray, which means he is mysterious and layered like an onion. Kai put down his chopsticks. An onion. In a good way, Seo said very seriously. Ren was watching Kai with that look again, not unfriendly, just attentive. Like Kai was interesting to him. Kai looked away. He was supposed to be the villain. Villains did not get looked at like that. That afternoon, Kai went back to his room and reviewed his plan. Everything was on track. Seo clearly liked Ren. Ren was clearly charmed by Seo. By the end of the month, they would be a couple, and Kai's weird, unexplainable sense of purpose here would be done. He fell asleep with his notebook open on his chest, his list of matchmaking steps half finished. He dreamed about blue eyes, and someone saying his name like it was warm. When he woke up, he stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he wrote at the bottom of his list, "Do not get attached. This is not your story." He underlined it twice. The school culture festival was in 2 weeks. It was, according to Kai's calculations, the perfect moment. Decorations, soft lighting, crowded spaces. Every romance story had a festival scene. It was practically a law. Kai had planned it in full detail. Seo would get a bit lost. Kai would casually mention that Ren was helping at the photography booth. Seo would go find him. They would take photos together. The lighting would be golden, and Cupid could take over from there. Easy, foolproof. What Kai had not planned for was Seo showing up at his door the night before the festival looking like he was about to cry. Kai stared at him. What's wrong? I found out that Ren's ex-boyfriend is coming to the festival, Seo said. His name is Park Do-hyun. He's very tall and very handsome, and apparently they broke up 6 months ago because of something complicated. And I don't know if Ren still has feelings for him, and Seo stopped, took a breath. Sorry, I don't know why I came here. Kai stepped back from the door. Come in. As Seo came in, he sat on Kai's floor, not the chair, the floor, and pulled his knees to his chest. Kai sat across from him and did not comment on the floor thing. Tell me what you know, Kai said. So Seo told him everything. He had heard the story from a classmate. Park Do-hyun and Ren had dated for nearly a year. Do-hyun had left for a study program abroad, and they had tried long distance, but it fell apart. Nobody knew whose fault it was. Ren had been quiet for months after. Kai listened. "Do you think Ren still likes him?" Seo asked quietly. Kai thought about it honestly. He had watched Ren for 3 weeks. He had eaten lunch with him for 2 weeks now. Ren was warm and open about most things, but whenever someone mentioned past relationships, he got very still and changed the subject. "I don't know," Kai said. And because lying to Seo felt wrong in a way he could not explain. "But I know Ren looks at you differently than he looks at other people." Seo looked up. "What do you mean?" "He's curious about you. He asks questions. He saves the seat next to him when you're late." Kai paused. "He doesn't do that with other people. I've watched." Seo's face did something complicated. Then he said, "You're surprisingly observant for someone who pretends not to care about anything." Kai said nothing. "Why do you do that?" Seo asked. "Pretend, I mean." "Who says I'm pretending?" Seo just looked at him, calm and steady, the way he sometimes got when he stopped being cheerful and became something quieter, more real. "You walked me to the library," Seo said. "You told me to find Ren. You keep showing up even though you always act like you don't want to be there. That's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care." Kai looked at his window. "Go to the festival tomorrow. Don't avoid Ren because of Dohyun. If Ren has feelings for his ex, you should know that anyway. And if he does, then at least you know. You can't make good decisions without the truth." Seo was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What do you get out of this, Kai? Out of helping me and Ren?" Kai opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because the honest answer was something he had not let himself think about. He had a reason once, a plan, a role to play. But somewhere in the past 3 weeks, the plan had started to feel less like strategy and more like self-punishment. "I should go," Seo said softly. He stood up and looked at Kai. "Thank you for listening." After he left, Kai sat alone on his floor for a long time. He pulled out his notebook, found the line he had written. "Do not get attached. This is not your story." He stared at it. Then slowly he closed the notebook. The festival was tomorrow. He would finish what he started. He had to. The festival was loud, bright, and smelled like fried food and regret. Kai stood near the entrance with his hands in his pockets, watching the crowds move. He had not planned to walk around. He was just there to make sure the plan worked. Quality control, professional. He spotted Ren at the photography booth 10 minutes in. Ren was wearing a soft cream-colored shirt and had a camera around his neck, laughing at something a classmate said. He looked easy and light, like nothing in the world was heavy. It was almost annoying how good he looked. Not that Kai noticed. That was purely an objective observation. Kai found Seo near the food stalls, holding a skewer of rice cakes with both hands and staring at them like they had personally wronged him. "Go find Ren," Kai said. Seo jumped. "You are so loud for a quiet person." "I am not loud. I just exist with purpose." Kai pointed toward the photography booth. "He's over there." Seo's face did the complicated thing again. "What if Dohyun is with him? Then you meet Dohyun. Knowing your rivals is important." Seo choked on his rice cake. "My rival? I didn't say I was. You came to my room the night before the festival because you were worried about Ren's ex-boyfriend. That's a rival situation." Seo looked at the skewer in his hands, then at the photography booth, then at Kai. "Come with me," he said. Kai blinked. "No. Please. I'll be weird and nervous alone. You're always very calm, like a wall, or a very stable piece of furniture. You compare me to furniture a lot. Is that a yes?" It was not supposed to be a yes. Kai was supposed to send Seo over there alone, observe from a distance, make sure sparks happened, and then leave. That was the plan. That was always the plan. "Fine," Kai said. For 3 minutes, they walked to the booth together. Ren saw them coming, and his face lit up, first landing on Seo with warmth, then sliding to Kai with that careful, curious look that Kai had started to dread. "You both came," Ren said, like it was a gift. "Kai made me walk over here," Seo said, which was only technically true. "I made you nothing," Kai said. Ren laughed. He handed Seo the camera. "Here, take a photo of something you like." Seo took the camera very seriously, spending about 45 seconds framing a shot of the decorations before taking it. Then he turned the camera toward Kai and Ren without warning. Your turn, Seo said. I'm not, Kai started. Click. Seo looked at the screen and smiled a smile that meant something Kai could not decode. He tilted the camera toward Kai so he could see. Kai stared at the photo. Ren was looking at Seo and smiling, but Kai was looking at Ren. Not the way a person looks at a friend. Not the way a villain watches a target. The way someone looks at something they have decided not to want. Kai's chest did something strange and unhelpful. I want a copy, Seo said cheerfully. Kai was going to delete that photo from the face of the earth. Then Park Do-hyun appeared. He was, as Seo had predicted, very tall and very handsome, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from knowing exactly how you looked. He came up to the booth and stopped when he saw Ren. Hey, Do-hyun said. Ren's whole body went still. Hey. The word between them had weight. The kind of weight that only exists when there is history underneath it. Kai glanced at Seo. Seo was watching Ren carefully. He was not panicking, he was just watching. You look good, Do-hyun said to Ren. Thanks, you too. A pause. The kind that asked questions without using words. Then Ren looked at Seo and Kai, like he was pulling himself back to the present. These are my friends, Seo and Kai. Do-hyun smiled politely. But his eyes lingered on Ren. Kai made a decision in about 2 seconds. He put his hand on Seo's shoulder and said, We were just leaving. Enjoy the festival. He walked Seo away before anyone could protest. They ended up near the garden area, quiet and away from the crowds. That was awkward, Seo said finally. Yes. Did you see the way he looked at Ren? Yes. Seo was quiet for a moment. What do I do now? Kai looked at the fairy lights strung between the trees. Nothing, he said. You don't do anything. You let Ren have that conversation. Whatever they need to say it. And then you see what he chooses. Seo turned to look at him. You give very good advice for a person who pretends to feel nothing. Kai did not answer that. Above them, the lights flickered softly. Somewhere behind them, the festival continued. And somewhere in a photography booth, Ren Han was probably deciding something. Kai told himself he did not care which way it went. He looked at the ground. He was starting to be a very bad liar, even to himself. Ren found them 20 minutes later. He did not find them by accident. He had clearly looked, which was information Kai filed away in the growing folder in his brain labeled Things that are going to be a problem. He's gone, Ren said. He sat down next to Seo on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. We talked. We're fine. We were over a long time ago. I just needed to say that out loud to him. Seo let out a breath so large it was almost comedic. Okay, good. That's good. Were you worried? Ren asked, smiling a little. No, Seo said immediately. Then, a little. Ren looked at him softly. Why? Because you went quiet when you saw him. And you always look like you're carrying something you don't know how to put down. Ren was still for a moment. Then he said, You notice things. Kai taught me to observe carefully. Ren turned to look at Kai. Did he? Kai had not said that in any lesson form. He had simply modeled it by existing. I never said that. You did it without words, Seo said brightly. Kai was going to start eating lunch alone again. He had been too available. This was his punishment. The three of them sat there in the garden for a while. It should have felt peaceful. It mostly did. Except Ren kept glancing at Kai in a way that made the back of Kai's neck warm. Not hostile, not cautious. Curious. The same curiosity from the beginning, except now it had teeth. Later, when Seo ran off to get food because he had eaten one rice cake and was now emotionally running on empty, Ren and Kai were left alone. Ren looked at Kai directly for the first time in a way that felt different. Why did you bring him to me? Ren asked. Kai said nothing. In the library, Ren said. You pointed him toward me. You've been, I don't know the right word, arranging things. I was helping him navigate the school. For 3 weeks? Kai did not answer. Ren leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. I've been thinking about it. You don't do things without reason. You're always 3 steps ahead of everyone. So I've been asking myself, what are you trying to set up? Kai looked at him evenly. Nothing. Kai. There was something about the way Ren said his name, like it was a question and an answer at the same time. Kai looked away. Seo is a good person. You are a good person. I thought you would be good together. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, you were trying to set us up. I was trying to help. Why does it matter to you? You barely knew either of us. Kai pressed his lips together. He did not have an answer that was safe to give. Can I tell you something? Ren asked. If you must. When Seo and I are together, he talks about you, a lot, more than you'd expect. And when I'm around you, I find myself. Ren stopped, then started again. I find myself paying more attention to you than I probably should. The garden was very quiet. Kai's heart was doing something medically concerning. Don't, Kai said. His voice came out flatter than he intended. Seo likes you. Focus on that. Ren looked at him for a long time. What if the person I want to focus on is standing right here? Ren said quietly. Kai stood up. Then you're confused. It's a festival. Fairy lights do things to people. Kai, Seo is coming back. Kai nodded toward the path where Seo was returning with an armful of snacks, looking pleased with himself. Keep your head straight. He walked away before Ren could say another word. His hands were not shaking. That was not a thing that was happening. He was the villain, the matchmaker, the background character in someone else's love story. He needed to remember that. He really, desperately needed to remember that. A week after the festival, something went wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Quietly wrong, like water getting into a wall. You do not see the damage until it is everywhere. Kai had done everything right. He had stepped back. He had stopped joining their lunches. He had been systematically returning to his original position of eating alone and being unapproachable. Seo showed up at his lunch table on Monday anyway. Why are you avoiding us? Seo asked, sitting down and unpacking his food like this was his assigned spot. I'm not avoiding anyone. I'm eating. You haven't come to lunch with us in 5 days. I had things to do. Seo stared at him. Kai, it's lunch. What did you have to do during lunch? Kai opened his mouth, closed it. Eating alone is my preferred state. You preferred to eat with us. I have evidence. Seo held up his phone. There was a photo, from the festival, of all three of them laughing. Kai had not known that picture was being taken. He looked, in it, genuinely happy. He looked at the photo for too long. Ren misses you, Seo said quietly. He asks about you. Kai's jaw tightened. You two should be spending time together. We do. But Ren is weird when you're not there. He gets distracted. That's not my problem. Seo put down his chopsticks. His voice went soft and serious in that way it did when he was being real. Can I ask you something and will you be honest? Kai looked at him. Do you have feelings for Ren? The cafeteria was very loud. Plates clattered. People laughed. Kai sat in the middle of all of it and felt very still. No, he said. Seo looked at him for a long time. I'm really bad at reading people, Seo said finally. But I don't think that's true. Kai looked down at his food. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Seo. Kai's voice was careful, deliberate. You like Ren. Ren was starting to like you. I was making that happen. That was the plan. Who made this plan? You? Seo tilted his head. Did anyone ask you to do this? Kai said nothing. Why would you? Seo stopped. His eyes went wide, slow and dawning, like something suddenly made sense. Kai, were you pushing me toward Ren because you thought you didn't deserve to be in the picture? The silence that followed was loud. That's not. Because that's what it looks like, Seo said, not unkindly. You have been doing everything for everyone else this whole time and giving yourself nothing. Kai stared at his food. His throat felt tight. I don't need anything, he said. Everyone needs something, Seo said. Even knives. Kai almost laughed. It came out wrong. Something between a laugh and something more painful. Seo reached across the table and put his hand over Kai's for 1 second, warm and brief. Then he pulled back. I'm going to tell you something, Seo said, and I need you to hear it. I don't have feelings for Ren the way you think I do. He's wonderful, and I like him as a person. But what I feel is it's not that kind of thing. I think I knew that for a while, but I didn't want to mess up whatever this was. Kai looked up. Seo met his eyes. Ren is looking for you, and I think you should stop running. Kai sat there for a moment. Then he said, quietly, I don't know how to be the person someone runs toward. Seo smiled. Slow and bright. That's okay. You can learn. We're all learning. Kai found Ren at the library. Of course he did. It was Wednesday. It was always going to be Wednesday in the library. Some things were just geography. Ren was shelving books when Kai walked in. He looked up, and for a second he just looked at Kai, like he was checking that Kai was real. You came, Ren said. Seo told me to. Ren smiled a little. Does Seo run your schedule now? He runs too many things, Kai said. He has too much energy for someone who drops his chopsticks that often. Ren set down his books. He came around the shelf and leaned against it, looking at Kai with that look, the full attention one, the one that made Kai feel seen in a way that was inconvenient and alarming. Can we talk? Ren asked. We're talking. Properly. Without you looking for the nearest exit the whole time. Kai crossed his arms. I don't do that. You looked at the door 4 times during our conversation at the festival. I was checking for Seo. Kai. There it was again, his name in Ren's voice, like something warm pressed to a cold window. Kai uncrossed his arms. He walked to a table and sat down. Ren sat across from him. Between them was a small reading lamp and about 2 weeks of things that had not been said. Ren folded his hands on the table. I know what you were doing, setting me up with Seo. Kai said nothing. I also know it didn't work. Not because Seo isn't wonderful. He is. But because the whole time, every time I was with him, I kept thinking about you. Ren's voice was steady, careful. I kept looking for you, wondering if you'd show up, feeling when you left. Kai looked at the lamp. I don't understand you, Ren said. You're cold on the outside, and then you do something like walk a lost transfer student to the library and push him toward the person you think he should be with. You sit in the wrong seat and don't move until you're ready. You write notes in a notebook and you eat alone on purpose, but you showed up every time either of us needed someone there. He paused. I've been trying to figure you out since day one. Don't, Kai said. His voice was low. I'm not. He stopped. I was supposed to be the background. I don't fit in. I'm not the kind of person who... Who what? Kai looked at him. Who gets chosen? Ren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm choosing you right now. The library was silent around them. Warm and paper-smelling and safe. Kai's chest did the medically concerning thing again. Except this time it did not stop. It kept going, steady and real, like a door opening into a room he had not known was there. This doesn't make sense, Kai said. Most things don't. I tried to set you up with someone else. Yeah, really bad plan. What were you thinking? Despite everything, Kai felt something tug at the corner of his mouth. I thought it would work. It didn't work because I was too busy noticing you. Kai looked at the table, then at Ren. Ren looked back, honest and open and patient in the way Kai had always found both frustrating and secretly wonderful. I don't know how to do this, Kai said quietly. Whatever this is. Neither do I, Ren said. But I'm willing to figure it out if you are. A pause. Also, Ren added, Seo already knows, he said, and I'm quoting, that this was the real plan all along and we just didn't know it yet. He seemed very pleased with himself. Kai stared at him. He planned this? I think we all did. Without knowing. Kai sat with that for a moment. Then he said, he's going to be insufferable about this. Completely, Ren agreed. He'll bring it up constantly. Forever, probably. They looked at each other. Fine, Kai said. The word was small, but it held everything. Ren smiled, full and real, and aimed entirely at Kai. And Kai, for the first time in longer than he could remember, let himself be smiled at. 3 weeks later, Kai was eating lunch at the right table. On purpose this time. Not by accident. Not because Seo had left a sticky note. By choice, which was a new experience and one he was still getting used to. Seo was across from him, telling a story about how he had gotten lost again, new level this time. He had ended up on the roof, and Ren was next to Kai, close enough that their arms touched when Ren reached for his water. Kai had stopped cataloging these moments. At first he had counted them, The number of times Ren chose the seat beside him. The number of texts that came in late at night for no real reason. The number of times Ren said, "Hey, you okay?" So quietly, it was just for Kai. He had stopped counting because the numbers were too big and too good, and he had not known what to do with that. And then the janitor found me, Seo finished. And honestly, I think he expects it now. He gave me a map. He had one ready. "He made a map specifically for you?" Kai asked. "It has my name on it, in permanent marker." Ren started laughing and did not stop for a while. Kai looked at them both, Seo, waving his chopsticks for emphasis, Ren, laughing with his whole face, and felt something settle in his chest. Not dramatic, not a revelation, just settled, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Which was a strange thing to feel when you had started out as the villain of the story. Later, when Seo had run off to return library books before the deadline, and Kai and Ren were left with the remains of lunch, Ren said quietly, "You're smiling." "No, I'm not." "A little. That's my resting face." Ren looked at him with visible disbelief. "Kai, your resting face has never looked like that." Kai picked up his chopsticks. "You don't know what my resting face looks like. I've been studying it for weeks. I know every version." This was either very romantic or very alarming, possibly both. Kai chose to look at his lunch. Ren bumped his shoulder lightly. "It looks good on you." The smiling. Kai said nothing, but he did not try to stop the expression either. That afternoon, they walked out of school together. Seo was somewhere ahead of them, enthusiastically greeting a group of people he had clearly met yesterday for the first time, but now considered his closest friends, because Seo collected people the way other people collected receipts, without meaning to, and always too many. Ren walked next to Kai, close but easy, hands in pockets. "Can I ask you something?" Kai said. "Always." Kai looked forward, at the path ahead. "When did you know, about me, that it was me you wanted?" Ren thought about it. "The cafeteria," he said, "the first week, when I saw you alone at the table and thought, he's choosing to be alone right now, but that's not the same as wanting to be. And then Seo showed up with the sticky note, and you sat down, and you said maybe 3 words the whole lunch, but you stayed. I thought, there's someone here who doesn't know how to ask for things. I wanted to be someone you'd ask." Kai stared at the path. "That was early," he said. "Very early," Ren agreed. "It was inconvenient. You were trying to set me up with someone else." "I was trying to help." "You were terrible at hiding it, though. The way you looked at things, you were always tracking, always careful. But there were cracks, moments where you'd forget to be blank." Ren glanced at him. "I liked those moments." Kai looked at him. Ren looked back. The afternoon light was warm and the street was quiet, and somewhere ahead of them, Seo was dramatically greeting his 4th new friend of the day. "For what it's worth," Kai said slowly, "you were also easy to watch. Annoyingly." Ren grinned. "Annoyingly?" "You make everyone feel important. It's distracting." "I'll try to be less distracting." "Don't," Kai said, before he could stop himself. Ren's grin went softer. He looked at Kai like the word was the best thing he had heard all week, maybe longer. "Okay," Ren said. "I won't." They walked on. Up ahead, Seo turned back and spotted them. His face broke into the most enormous smile that human muscles could physically produce. "There they are," he called out. "My greatest achievement." "We are not your achievement," Kai said. "I kept the faith. I held the space. I believed in this. You dropped your chopsticks for 3 weeks and talked about colors. And it worked." Kai looked at Ren. Ren was already looking at him. "He's going to put this in his personal statement," Kai said. "Absolutely," Ren said. "He'll tell this story to everyone he knows. He already has. He texted me at midnight with a summary." Kai closed his eyes, briefly opened them. Why are we friends with him? Ren thought about it with great seriousness. Because he kept a seat for you with a sticky note, and that's how this started. Kai thought about it. "Fine," he said. "He can have the credit." Ren smiled. And Kai, the boy who was written to ruin things, the villain who had forgotten to leave, the matchmaker who had accidentally matched himself, smiled back. Not small this time. Real and whole and his. The last thing Park Ji-ho remembered before dying was stepping off a curb while reading a novel on his phone. A truck, a flash of light, and then an apron. He opened his eyes to a fire burning low in a stone hearth. The smell hit him first. Ginger, star anise, something rich and slow cooked. His hands were rough and calloused in a way his actual hands had never been, and when he looked down, there was a large wooden spoon gripped in his right fist like a weapon. He was standing in the middle of the biggest kitchen he had ever seen in his life. Stone counters stretched wall to wall. Copper pots hung from the ceiling on iron hooks. Around him, maybe 30 other cooks moved fast and silent, cutting and stirring and plating, and not one of them looked at him. Not one. He cleared his throat. Nobody turned around. He dropped the spoon on the floor with a loud clatter. A young boy nearby glanced at it, stepped over it, and kept moving. So, he was invisible. Great. It took Ji-ho about 2 hours of standing around and carefully tasting things to figure out his situation. He had transmigrated into a body. The body of a cook named Wei Mingzhu, who apparently worked in the imperial palace kitchens of a dynasty that looked very much like ancient China, except slightly more fictional. Wei Mingzhu had been a cook for 6 years, and in those 6 years had never once been spoken to directly by any official, any servant of rank, or any member of the royal household. The man was a ghost in his own life. Ji-ho felt a strange kind of sad kinship with him. He also felt very hungry, so he ate a bowl of congee he found sitting on the counter and decided to figure out the rest later. His first full day in the body of Wei Mingzhu taught him several things. 1, he was responsible for making soup, just soup, every day, one specific pot of clear broth for the imperial meal, which would be tasted by an eunuch official, approved or rejected, and then carried away. He had never personally met the emperor, and there was no reason to think he ever would. 2, the other cooks were not mean to him exactly. They just talked around him, over him, past him, like he was part of the furniture. 3, Wei Mingzhu's recipe box was hidden under a loose stone near the fire. Ji-ho found it by accident when he tripped. That recipe box changed everything. He opened it carefully, pages worn thin at the edges from years of handling. The handwriting was cramped and small, but every recipe had a note beside it. Not instructions, feelings. This soup is for homesickness. This dish is for cold mornings when you miss someone. This broth is for grief you cannot name. Ji-ho sat down on the floor right there beside the hearth and read the whole thing. Wei Mingzhu had cooked every dish with a feeling attached to it. He had been trying quietly and alone to put emotion into every meal that left his hands, and nobody had ever noticed. Ji-ho decided right then that if he was going to be stuck in this body, he was going to cook the way this man deserved to cook, with everything. He made the broth that afternoon with the recipe labeled warmth for a person who has forgotten they deserve to be cared for. He did not know who would eat it. He added every ingredient exactly as described, following the notes like a letter. The eunuch came to taste it. He tasted it. He stood very still. Then he tasted it again. He picked up the pot. He walked out of the kitchen. He did not say a single word to Ji-ho. Ji-ho watched him go and thought, well, that's either very good or very bad. He found out the next morning a different eunuch appeared at the start of the kitchen shift. Senior, the kind with an official seal hanging from his belt. He walked directly to Ji-ho, which was alarming because nobody ever walked directly to Ji-ho. You are Wei Mingzhu? Yes, said Ji-ho, with only a small voice crack. His Majesty the Emperor has sent word. Your broth is to be served at every meal from this day forward, morning, afternoon, and evening. Silence fell over the kitchen. Every single cook stopped moving at exactly the same time. Ji-ho could feel 30 pairs of eyes swivel to him in unison. It was the most attention he had received since arriving. Every meal? He said. Every meal. The eunuch left. The kitchen stayed silent for another 5 seconds. Then everyone went back to work and carefully, pointedly, did not look at Ji-ho again. But this time the not looking felt different. This time it had weight. Ji-ho picked up his spoon. His heart was doing something strange and fast in his chest. He thought, I have never met the Emperor. The Emperor has never met me. We have only spoken through a bowl of soup. He looked down at the recipe box and thought about the label he had chosen yesterday. Warmth for a person who has forgotten they deserve to be cared for. He wondered, without meaning to, what that said about the man who ate it and asked for more. 3 weeks passed. Every meal, 3 times a day, Jiho made the broth. Every time the eunuch came to collect it. Every time the pot came back empty. The emperor ate every drop. The kitchen had started to change around Jiho in small ways he was only beginning to notice. When he reached for the good cutting board, someone moved aside. When he needed the back burner, it was always free. Nobody spoke to him still, not really, but the silence had shifted from the invisible kind to the aware kind. He was being noticed. He was not sure how he felt about it. On the 22nd day, a different eunuch arrived at the kitchen, not the usual one. This one was younger, with a nervous energy that made the other cooks bow lower than normal. He carried a piece of paper with a red seal that Jiho, even as a transmigrator with limited knowledge of imperial protocol, recognized immediately as something important. The eunuch stopped in front of Jiho. Everyone in the kitchen found somewhere else to look at extremely carefully. His Majesty has an inquiry, the eunuch said, reading from the paper in a formal voice that suggested he had practiced this, regarding the preparation method of the broth. Specifically, why it tastes different each day while remaining the same recipe. Jiho blinked. He noticed that? The eunuch looked up from the paper. Is that your answer? No, sorry, Jiho thought fast. Each batch uses the same ingredients, but the fire is different every day. Morning fire is slower. Afternoon fire is hotter. Evening fire I let burn down low before I start. The soup learns from the heat. The eunuch wrote this down with a very serious expression. He bowed. He left. Jiho turned back to his pot. His hands were a little shaky. He told himself it was because of the fire, which was definitely too hot right now, and not because the emperor had apparently been thinking about his soup with enough attention to notice daily variation. The answer came back the next morning through the same young eunuch. His Majesty says, "Tell the cook the evening version is his favorite." And then the eunuch left again. Jiho stood there holding a ladle. The cook next to him, a stern woman named Ma Shu, who had never once spoken to Jiho directly in 3 weeks, said, without looking up from the vegetables she was chopping, "You should feel honored." "I do," said Jiho. "Good," she said. "Make sure the evening broth does not get worse." Which was her way of saying congratulations, probably. Jiho chose to take it that way. He made the evening broth that night with the recipe labeled, "For loneliness that you pretend is not there." He had been cycling through the box, choosing by instinct. He did not know what was making him pick the ones he picked. He just read the labels and chose the one that felt right. The next morning the eunuch came again. His Majesty asks if the cook has a name. Jiho's heart did something complicated. The emperor had been eating his soup for almost a month, and only now asked his name. Not through official records, not through the kitchen supervisor. He asked through a message, informal, like a question between people. "Wei Mingzhu," Jiho said. "His Majesty will remember it," the eunuch said, and left. Jiho put down his spoon and looked at the fire for a long time. He thought about the novel he had been reading when he got hit by the truck. It had been a transmigration story, actually. He had been on chapter 43. The protagonist had just met the male lead for the first time. He thought about the face of the emperor, which he had never seen. He only knew the man through an empty bowl returned to the kitchen 3 times a day, and a series of short messages passed through a nervous young eunuch who seemed to feel very stressed about all of it. He thought about a recipe book full of feelings. He thought, I am in a transmigration story, am I not? He thought, oh no. And then he laughed, alone in the early morning kitchen with the fire burning low, because it was either laugh or panic, and panic would ruin the broth. Jiho saw the emperor for the first time by accident. It was raining, not the polite kind of rain, but the aggressive kind, the kind that comes sideways and turns the palace corridors into small rivers. Jiho had been sent, for the first and probably last time, to deliver an additional pot of broth to the royal banquet hall, because apparently the kitchen porter had broken his ankle, slipping on the wet stones, and there was nobody else. He had been told 3 things. Walk quickly, keep your eyes down, do not speak unless spoken to. He had walked quickly, he had kept his eyes down, he had rounded a corner too fast in the rain, and walked directly into a person. The pot survived. Jiho did not drop it. This was, he felt, a miracle of spatial awareness. He looked up to apologize. He made eye contact with the most unfairly beautiful person he had ever seen in either of his two lives. The man was tall, dark formal robes, hair pinned with something gold, high cheekbones, and the kind of sharp jaw that made Jiho think, completely involuntarily, that the person who carved this face had put in extra time on that particular detail. He was flanked by guards who had their hands on their swords, which was a sign that this was probably a very important person, the most important person. The emperor looked down at the pot in Jiho's arms. He looked up at Jiho's face. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the emperor said, in a voice that was lower and quieter than Jiho had imagined from all the formal messages, "You are Wei Mingju." It was not a question. "Yes," Jiho said, and remembered immediately that he was supposed to bow and bowed, almost sloshing the broth. "The soup. I was bringing it to the banquet hall, the porter." The emperor looked at the pot again. He had an expression Jiho could not read. It was very flat, like a calm lake, the kind that is very deep. You walk fast. "I did not want it to get cold," Jiho said, and then added, "Your Majesty, 1 second too late." Something in the emperor's expression moved. It was not a smile. It was more like a shift, the way light changes when a cloud passes. He stepped to the side of the path to let Jiho pass. "Continue," he said. Jiho continued. He walked all the way to the banquet hall without tripping, handed the pot to the waiting official, turned around, and walked all the way back to the kitchen. He sat down on the floor next to the fire. He said to nobody, "That man is going to be a problem." Mashu, who was grinding spices nearby, said, without looking up, "Yes." "You heard what I said?" "I hear everything in this kitchen," she said. "I just choose not to involve myself." She paused her grinding. "His Majesty is known to be serious. He rarely speaks to people outside official settings. He has not spoken informally to anyone in the kitchen in 6 years. 6 years. Jiho had been here exactly 23 days. "I see," said Jiho. "Do you?" said Mashu. It was not a question either. She went back to grinding. That evening, Jiho made the broth with the recipe labeled, "For the strange feeling of meeting someone who already knows something about you." He had not known Wei Mingju had written that one. He found it tucked behind 2 other pages, like it had been hidden slightly. The pot came back empty as always. But this time there was something with it. A small folded piece of paper tucked under the lid. Not a formal message, just a few words, written in a hand that was controlled and precise. It said, "The evening version remains the best." Why? Jiho stared at it for a long time. He wrote back on a scrap of paper, pushed it into the next morning's delivery, because by evening everything has had more time to think. He did not know why he wrote that. He did not know if it made sense. He handed the pot to the eunuch and told himself to stop being weird about a man he had met for 30 seconds in the rain. He was not very successful. That night he dreamed about a pair of eyes looking at him across a pot of broth, flat and calm and very, very deep. The paper messages became a thing. Nobody officially acknowledged that they existed. Not the eunuch, who collected the pot every meal with a carefully blank face. Not Ma Shu, who definitely noticed and said nothing. Not any of the other cooks who had gone from ignoring Jiho to watching him with the focused attention of people who had discovered something interesting happening in their workplace and did not want to miss it. The emperor's messages were short. Jiho's were short too. Usually, it felt like neither of them wanted to be the one who wrote more. Day 29. Today's broth had a different smell, almost sweet. Jiho. I added 1 extra piece of dried fruit. It felt right. Day 31. Does the cook always decide things by feeling? Jiho. The cook who taught me believed food remembers who made it. If you are distracted, the food knows. Day 32. After a long pause of nothing. What is the cook thinking about today? No question mark. Jiho held the paper for a while. He wrote back, "Someone I have not met properly yet." Then he stared at what he had written, thought that was deeply too honest, and sent it anyway, because changing it at that point felt like cowardice. The reply came back the same evening. Is that an answer or a complaint? Jiho laughed so hard he accidentally oversalted the pot and had to start over. By day 35 he had started looking forward to the messages more than was reasonable. He told himself it was just because the transmigrated life of an invisible cook was boring, and this was the most interesting thing happening to him. He told himself that a lot. He also started putting more care into what he chose from the recipe box. He read the labels slower. He sat with the feeling of each one before choosing. Day 38, the Emperor's message said, "I would like to see how it is made." Jiho stared at that. He wrote back, carefully, "The Imperial Kitchen is not usually a place for visitors." The reply came in about 4 hours, which was fast. "I am aware, I built it." Which, Jiho thought, was technically a great point. He also thought, a little wildly, that the Emperor had just made a joke. A very dry, understated joke. He wrote back, "Your Majesty is correct, and I apologize for forgetting that." And then under it he wrote, "Tomorrow morning, the fire starts at the first bell." He sent it before he could overthink. The kitchen, the next morning, was very quiet. Ma Shu arrived early, which she never did. 2 other cooks arrived early, which they also never did. Everyone was chopping and stirring with the very focused energy of people trying extremely hard to look like they were not waiting for something. Jiho started the fire at the first bell. At the second bell, the Emperor walked into the kitchen. No announcement, no procession, just the guards outside the door and the Emperor himself, in simpler robes than before, standing in the entrance of the kitchen and looking around like he was seeing it for the first time. Which, Jiho realized, he probably was. Emperors did not typically visit kitchens. Every cook in the room bowed without looking up. The Emperor waved one hand and said, "Continue." They continued, with slightly more concentration than usual. He walked to where Jiho was standing, at the large center fire. "You start very early," the Emperor said. "The first pot needs 2 hours," Jiho said. He handed over a small tasting bowl without thinking about it, then thought about it, and almost took it back. But the Emperor took it from him without looking offended. He tasted it. The broth was only 40 minutes in, not ready yet. He said, "It is thinner, more plain. It gets richer as it goes," Jiho said. "Right now it is still becoming itself." The Emperor looked at him, that flat, deep expression again. "You speak about soup like it is a person." "Wei Mingzhu, who taught me how to cook, believed it was," Jiho said. He was not exactly lying. The recipe book was full of that belief. "And you?" "I am starting to." They stood next to the fire, in the same silence that was not actually silence, the kind with things moving around inside it. The kitchen was very carefully not watching them. The fire cracked and shifted. The Emperor said, very quietly, "I have not entered this part of the palace in 6 years." He did not say why. Jiho did not ask. He just added 3 more ingredients to the pot and stirred, slow and even, the way the recipe described. The Emperor stayed for the whole 2 hours. He did not say much else. When the broth was finished and poured and the eunuch came to collect it, the Emperor stood aside, watched it go, and then said to Jiho, "Same time tomorrow?" Jiho said yes before he understood what he was agreeing to. When the Emperor left, every cook in the kitchen simultaneously exhaled. Ma Shu pointed her knife at Jiho and said, "You are going to cause such problems." "I know," said Jiho. "Good," she said, which meant she thought it was worth it, or possibly that she had no idea how to stop it. Either way. His name was Minister Chen Boyang, and he arrived on day 42 like bad weather, formal and cold, and very well dressed in the way of someone who wanted you to notice how formal and cold and well dressed he was. He came to the kitchen himself, which was the first odd thing. Officials did not come to the kitchen. Jiho was in the middle of the morning prep when Ma Shu appeared at his elbow and said in a low voice, "Someone is here for you, be careful." Chen Boyang stood at the kitchen entrance. He looked around the room with the expression of someone who had walked into a lesser establishment than expected. He looked at Jiho. "You are Wei Mingzhu." "Yes," said Jiho. "You are cooking for His Majesty." "His Majesty eats what comes from this kitchen," Jiho said carefully. "I am one of the cooks." Chen Boyang's expression said he found that answer unhelpfully technical. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have been seen in the kitchen with the Emperor, several mornings now. People are talking." Jiho thought, "Let them talk, I am making soup," he said. His Majesty expressed interest in the preparation process. "I am simply cooking." "You are simply a cook." Chen Boyang corrected. That is all you are. The emperor has many responsibilities. His attention should not be drawn to. He gestured at Jiho and the surrounding kitchen with a movement that managed to dismiss everything at once. Distractions. Jiho was quiet for a moment. He looked at the pot on the fire. Then he said, very calmly, I do not call him here. He comes. If you want him to stop, you will need to speak with him about that. Chen Boyang went still in the way of someone who had expected a different reaction and was recalculating. You are bold, he said, for a cook. I am just finishing the morning broth, Jiho said. If you have nothing else, I should focus on this. The fire changes everything. The minister left. Jiho kept his breathing even and his hands steady. When the kitchen door closed, he stirred the pot 3 times fast and reminded himself that he was, technically, just a cook. He had no power here. He had no rank. What he had was a recipe box full of feelings and an emperor who came to his kitchen every morning before the second bell. He chose the recipe labeled, for standing firm when someone tries to make you feel small. He made it well. That evening, the message under the lid said, Chen Boyang came to see you today. Jiho wrote back, he did. Reply, what did he say? Jiho, that I am a distraction, a longer gap than usual. Then, he is wrong. Jiho read that twice. He pressed the paper flat on the counter and looked at those 3 words for a long time. He felt something in his chest shift. He wrote back, he is not entirely wrong. I have been thinking about whether this is good for you. Reply faster this time. Do not make that decision for me. Jiho sat with that for the whole evening. He burned the late pot slightly because he was not paying attention. Ma Shu fixed it without saying anything and gave him a look that said she was absolutely saying something, just not out loud. He wrote one more note that night. He folded it and left it with the pot, even though there was no meal delivery until morning. It said, I am not going anywhere. I am only worried. When the morning eunuch collected the pot, he also left a note. 3 words again. I know. Thank you. Jiho did not talk to anyone for an hour. He just cooked. It happened on day 51, and nobody was ready for it, including Jiho. The morning kitchen visit was normal. The emperor stood by the fire. Jiho cooked. They talked about small things, the recipe, the weather. One time the emperor had made a comment about court meetings being long, and Jiho had said, sounds like you need better snacks, entirely by accident. And the emperor had looked at him with that deep lake expression and said, probably, very seriously, and Jiho had had to turn back to the fire before his face did something embarrassing. On day 51, the emperor arrived early, before the fire was fully started. Jiho was crouched by the hearth, adding the first kindling, when he heard footsteps and looked up. You are early, Jiho said, because he apparently had no self-preservation instinct. So are you, said the emperor. I live here, said Jiho, basically. The emperor almost smiled. Jiho had started to learn the signs. The small thing that happened in the corner of his mouth. The slight shift around the eyes. It lasted about half a second, and then the flat expression returned, but Jiho was getting faster at catching it. He went back to the fire. The emperor sat on a low stool near the counter, which was still slightly unbelievable every time it happened. An emperor sitting in a kitchen on a basic wooden stool. For a while it was quiet. Then the emperor said, Chen Boyang has been speaking to other ministers. About me, said Jiho. About the time I spend here. A pause. He believes I am behaving in a way that is, another pause, not appropriate for my position. Jiho stirred the pot. Maybe he is right. I told you not to decide that for me. I am not deciding. I am saying maybe someone who knows court rules better than I do has a point. Chen Boyang has a point about many things, the emperor said. He is still wrong about this. He was looking at the fire. His voice was the same even tone he always used, but there was something underneath it today that Jiho had not heard before. I spent 4 years being told what was appropriate, what to prioritize, who to speak to. The broth was the first thing in 4 years that felt like something outside all of that. Jiho stopped stirring. The emperor did not look at him. You cook things that feel like something. I do not know how. But every meal I know which recipe you chose and why, even though you never tell me. The morning ones feel like the day starting. The afternoon ones feel like effort. The evening ones feel like..." He stopped. "Like what?" Jiho said, and his voice was quieter than he meant. "Like someone is sitting with you," the emperor said, "even when you are alone." The fire cracked. Something fragrant rose from the pot. The kitchen around them was empty because it was still very early, and for once there were no other cooks pretending not to listen. Jiho turned from the fire and looked at the emperor directly. He had been careful not to stare. He had been careful about a lot of things. He stopped being careful. He said, "The recipe I chose this morning is labeled in the book as, for the feeling you get when you realize you have been waiting for someone without knowing it." The emperor looked up at him. Neither of them moved. Then the emperor stood up. He was taller than Jiho by several inches, and standing this close that registered more clearly than usual, he said, quietly, "Wei Mingju." "Yes," said Jiho. "I do not know the protocol for this situation." "Neither do I," said Jiho. "I am a cook." "You are the most inconvenient person I have met in 6 years of ruling," the emperor said. And then, almost like the words surprised him too, "I have been looking for reasons to come to this kitchen for 7 weeks." Jiho thought, this is where a smart person says something diplomatic. He was not a smart person. He said, "The broth is ready at the first bell. I am always here." The emperor looked at him for a long moment. "Always," he said, and it sounded like he was testing the word. "Always," Jiho confirmed. Something in the emperor's face changed, slow and real, like a lock opening. He reached out and picked up the tasting bowl from the counter. He dipped it into the pot and tasted it without looking away from Jiho. "This one," he said, "is the best yet?" Jiho turned back to the fire so the emperor could not see his face. His hands were shaking a little, not badly, just enough to know something was happening. The petition arrived at court on day 58. Jiho found out the way he found out most things, through Ma Shu, who had sources everywhere in the palace and said nothing unless it was important. She appeared at his side at midday and said, without preamble, "Chen Boyang has submitted a formal complaint to the court council. He is requesting that all kitchen staff who have had direct contact with the emperor above normal duty be reassigned to the outer palace." Jiho put down his knife. "All kitchen staff," he said. "Specifically you," said Ma Shu, but he worded it broadly so it would not look targeted. Jiho was quiet for a while. He looked at the fire. "What happens if the council approves it? You move to the outer palace kitchens. No contact with the imperial household. Different kitchen entirely." She paused. "His Majesty would not receive your broth anymore. A different cook would take over. The thing about being a transmigrated nobody in a royal palace was that you had very little power over anything." Jiho knew this. He had known it since the first day. He was not nobility. He was not an official. He was a cook, with calloused hands and a recipe box that had been hidden under a stone. He thought about the messages under the lid. He thought about a man sitting on a wooden stool by a fire for 7 weeks, because the soup made him feel less alone. He said, "When is the council meeting?" "Tomorrow morning," said Ma Shu. That night, Jiho did not sleep well. He lay on the thin mat in the kitchen staff quarters and stared at the ceiling and thought about what he could do, which was essentially nothing, and what the emperor would do, which he did not know. He had left a note in that evening's delivery. Just, "I heard about the petition. Do what is right for your court. I will be fine." The emperor's reply came back an hour later, which was very fast and meant someone had run. "Stop telling me what is right." And then, in smaller writing below, as if added after, "You will not be going anywhere." Jiho held that paper for a long time. The morning arrived. The council meeting happened across the palace, in a room Jiho had never seen. He started the fire at the first bell and cooked and waited. The emperor did not come at the second bell. He did not come at the third. Jiho cooked. He chose a recipe labeled, "For when you are afraid but you keep going anyway." He put everything into it. The eunuch collected the morning pot without a word. At midday, the senior eunuch returned to the kitchen. Not the nervous young one, the important one with the seal. He walked to Jiho directly and said, "His Majesty addressed the court council this morning regarding the petition." Every cook in the kitchen stopped moving. "The petition has been dismissed. His Majesty stated that decisions regarding palace staff belong solely to his authority, and that Minister Chen Boyang overstepped the council's scope. The senior eunuch paused. His Majesty also said, for the record, that the kitchen broth has had direct positive effect on imperial health, and that reorganizing the kitchen staff would be counterproductive to court function. Jiho said. He said that? About the broth? Those were the official stated reasons, yes, the senior eunuch said. His face stayed official and blank, but something around his eyes suggested he found all of this very entertaining. He also had Minister Chen Boyang formally reminded that the inner palace staff is not the council's concern. He bowed. He left. The kitchen stayed very quiet for 4 seconds. Then Ma Shu said, loudly, for the first time in months, to Jiho directly, "That man just went to court for your soup." "For the soup?" Jiho said. "Yes," said Ma Shu. "Absolutely for the soup." Jiho put his face in his hands. His ears were very warm. He was not going to say what he was thinking, because what he was thinking was both obvious and terrifying. That evening's delivery came back with a note. "Are you still there?" Jiho wrote back, "I am making your evening broth right now. The fire is good tonight." Reply, "Good. Come to the garden gate tomorrow, before the first bell. I would like to walk." Jiho looked at that. He looked at it for a while. He wrote, "Yes." The garden in the hour before dawn was another world. Jiho had never been in this part of the palace. The inner garden was full of paths that curved around small ponds, stone lanterns that burned low, trees old enough to have watched several dynasties pass. In the dark before sunrise, the whole place smelled like wet earth and night-blooming flowers. The emperor was already at the gate when Jiho arrived, alone. No guards visible, though Jiho was fairly sure they were close. He was in simple robes, the kind that did not announce themselves. He looked for once like a person rather than an institution. They walked. For a while, neither of them said anything. The garden was quiet enough that Jiho could hear the water in the pond and the distant bells of the early rising city beyond the palace walls. The emperor said, "How long have you been here, in the palace?" "Almost 2 months," said Jiho. "Where were you before?" Jiho thought about a truck and a phone and a transmigration story on chapter 43. He said, "Somewhere far away, a different life. Do you miss it?" He thought about it seriously. His small apartment, instant noodles at midnight, complete anonymity. "Sometimes," he said, "less than I expected." The emperor nodded. They walked around the first pond. A bird moved in the reeds. "I have been thinking," the emperor said, in the tone of someone who had been thinking very carefully, "about what is appropriate." "And?" said Jiho. "And I have decided that I have spent 6 years being told what is appropriate for my position, and I am tired of it." He said this flatly, like a fact. "I am also aware of what it means to pay this much attention to a kitchen cook and what people will say. I am not naive about the politics." "What did you decide?" Jiho asked. "That the politics are manageable." The emperor stopped walking. He turned to look at Jiho directly, which he did not always do. Usually he looked at things beside Jiho, or the fire, or the pot. Now he looked at him. "That I have spent 7 weeks finding reasons to visit a kitchen, and I am too old for that kind of indirect nonsense." "You are 26, said Jiho, who had gathered this from kitchen gossip. "Exactly," said the emperor. "Too old." Jiho thought he was probably going to smile, and he worked hard not to. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," the emperor said slowly, like each word was placed carefully, "that I have no practice at this. I have had very little of anything that was only mine in a long time, and this," he gestured between them, a small movement, "has been mine, more than almost anything else." Jiho looked at him. The garden was lightening around them, the sky going from black to the dark blue that comes just before color. He said, "The recipe book has a label for this." "I know," said the emperor. "You have been working through it." "You noticed?" "I noticed everything," the emperor said. "It came out very quiet. Since the first bowl, I noticed." Jiho thought about Wei Mingju, who had cooked alone in that kitchen for 6 years, and nobody had ever looked. He thought about a recipe labeled for warmth, given to someone who forgot they could receive it, and an empty bowl that came back every single time. He said, "I want to show you something." He reached into his sleeve, where he had started keeping the recipe box. He had not planned to bring it tonight. He brought it anyway. He opened it and showed the emperor the first page. The handwriting, small and certain. The first recipe. Below it the label. Warmth for a person who has forgotten they deserve to be cared for. The emperor read it. He looked at the page for a long time. "That was the first one you sent," he said. "Yes. You chose it by feeling." "Yes." The emperor closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, something in his face was different. Less like a lake. More like water that is actually moving. "Wei Mingzhu," he said. "You can call me Mingzhu," Jiho said, "if you want." "Mingzhu," he said it like he was learning it, like he wanted to learn it. "I would like permission to visit the kitchen, every morning." Not as an emperor visiting a kitchen, as... He stopped, started again. "As myself." "You have always been yourself in my kitchen," Jiho said. The emperor looked at him with that expression that Jiho had spent 2 months learning to read. He was getting much better at it. What it said right now was something close to grateful, close to relieved, close to something that did not have a quick name yet but was growing. The sky was getting lighter. In the palace, the first bell would ring soon. Jiho closed the recipe book. He said, "Come to the kitchen at the first bell. I will start the fire." "Every morning?" the emperor said. "Every morning," said Jiho. They walked back to the gate together, not quite touching, the garden quiet around them. At the gate they stopped. The city beyond the walls was starting to wake. The palace bells were about to ring. The emperor said, not looking away, "The recipe you will make today." "I have not chosen it yet," Jiho said. "What does it need to say?" Jiho thought about 2 months of messages. An empty bowl. A man sitting on a wooden stool by a fire. A dismissed petition. A garden before dawn. He said, "I think today is for the feeling of something beginning." The emperor was quiet for a moment. Then quietly, so quietly it was almost just breath. "Yes." The first bell rang. Jiho smiled. He went to start the fire. Behind him, he heard the emperor follow, and he thought, well, here we are then, the invisible cook and the lonely emperor and the fire between them. It was, all things considered, a very good place to begin. The last thing Wei Jian remembered from his real life was this: a half-eaten cup of instant noodles, a phone screen glowing at 2 a.m., and the final chapter of the web novel, Flame and Frost, loading way too slowly. Then the ceiling fan fell, directly onto his head. He woke up in a body that was not his, wearing robes that cost more than his entire apartment, lying on a bed so soft it felt like a cloud had personally apologized to him. "Young master, you are awake." Wei Jian stared at the ceiling of an unfamiliar room. Stone walls, silk curtains, a nervous servant hovering beside him, with the expression of someone who expected to be slapped at any moment. Right, he was inside. Flame and the Frost. Now in the body he had taken over, Ren Yufei, the villain, the cold, arrogant young lord who spent the first 15 chapters of the novel making the male leads' lives miserable before getting publicly humiliated, stripped of his title, and then, in a very dramatic fashion, falling off a cliff. Great. Wonderful. Very exciting. Wei Jian sat up slowly and looked around the room. He needed to think. He had read the whole novel. He knew every plot point, every character, every terrible thing Ren Yufei was supposed to do, and he had exactly zero interest in doing any of it. His goals were simple. 1. Do not fall off a cliff. 2. Collect as much money as possible. 3. Find a quiet town somewhere far from the main story, buy a small house, grow vegetables, and live peacefully until this whole transmigration situation sorted itself out. He would not go near the male lead, Shen Liuhe, the ice-cold sword cultivator who was technically Ren Yufei's sworn rival. He would not go near the second male lead, Xiao Chengyu, the cheerful merchant prince who showed up in Chapter 7 and caused half the plot's chaos. He would avoid all of them. he would be a ghost, a very rich ghost. He called for the servant, whose name turned out to be Doufu. Doufu was 17, terrified of everything, and had the biggest eyes Wei Jian had ever seen on a human being. "How much money do I have?" Wei Jian asked. Doufu blinked. "My lord?" "Money, gold, silver, coins. How much?" Doufu told him. Wei Jian let out a very long breath. Ren Yufei was rich. Disgustingly, offensively, completely undeservedly rich. The estate alone was worth more than Wei Jian's entire neighborhood back home. Okay, so step 1 was already handled. He spent the next 2 days quietly reading through Ren Yufei's personal records and planning his escape from the story. He sold 3 unnecessary properties. He reorganized the household finances. He ate extremely good food and slept for 12 hours, because he deserved it, after dying via ceiling fan. He was completely calm, completely in control. Then, on the 3rd day, someone knocked on his study door and walked in without waiting for an answer. Wei Jian looked up from his accounts. The person standing in his doorway was tall, dressed in white robes with silver trim, with dark eyes that looked like they had personally seen and judged every sin in the universe. His expression was carved from something colder than ice. He had the face of someone drawn by an artist who was showing off. Shen Liuhe, the male lead. In Ren Yufei's personal study. "You look different," Shen Liuhe said. His voice was low and flat. He studied Wei Jian the way you study a math problem you already know the answer to. Wei Jian's brain did several things at once. It remembered every scene between Ren Yufei and Shen Liuhe. It remembered that in the novel, this meeting resulted in a screaming match and Ren Yufei throwing a very expensive vase. It remembered that Shen Liuhe was supposed to be the hero of this story, cold and untouchable and brilliant, and that he and Ren Yufei hated each other with the passion of 2 people who had never once spoken like adults. Wei Jian put down his pen. "I've been unwell," he said, in the most neutral voice he could manage. Shen Liuhe stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in his expression, confusion maybe, or suspicion. "You called off the harassment of the Shen estate merchants," he said. "All 3 orders, reversed." "Oh, right." Wei Jian had done that. Ren Yufei had apparently been running some kind of petty economic war against the Shen family's trade routes, and Wei Jian had cancelled the whole thing because it seemed exhausting and pointless. "It was a waste of resources," Wei Jian said honestly. The silence in the room was so heavy it had weight. Shen Liuhe looked at him for another 5 seconds. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out. Wei Jian stared at the empty doorway. That went fine, he told himself. Doufu, who had been hiding behind a bookshelf the whole time, slowly emerged. "My lord," he whispered, "young Master Shen has never left a room without saying something cutting. Not once in 7 years." Wei Jian picked up his pen again. "Good," he said. "I prefer quiet." He ignored the fact that Shen Liuhe had looked back at him once, just once, right before stepping through the door. He also ignored the way his own heart had done something very inconvenient in his chest. He had vegetables to plan for. He had a cliff to avoid. He did not have time for this. 3 weeks into his very careful, very sensible plan to avoid the plot entirely, Wei Jian went to the capital city to liquidate a property and accidentally walked into a festival. Not a small quiet festival, a massive, chaotic, flower and lantern festival that filled every street in the capital like someone had tipped over a box of celebration and left it to spread. He had not known about this festival. It was not in the novel. Apparently minor background events were not important enough for the author to write down, which, fair, honestly, but also extremely inconvenient right now. Wei Jian stood in the middle of the main street and watched thousands of people push past him in silk and embroidered cloth and flower crowns. Paper lanterns floated overhead. Someone nearby was selling skewers of candied fruit. A group of children ran between his legs chasing a paper butterfly. "You look lost," said a voice beside him. Wei Jian turned. The person next to him was leaning against a market stall with the casual ease of someone who had never experienced stress in their entire life. He was dressed in deep blue merchant robes with gold embroidery, wearing a smile that looked like it had been installed on his face at birth and never once removed. His hair was half tied up. He had a skewer of candied fruit in one hand, and he was absolutely, completely, obviously Xiao Chengyu. The second male lead. The cheerful disaster merchant prince who caused chaos in every chapter he appeared in. Not because he was mean, but because things just sort of happened around him. Like the universe had decided he needed to be at the center of every interesting situation. Wei Jian's eye twitched. "I am not lost," he said stiffly. "I am simply assessing the environment." Xiao Chengyu tilted his head. "You're Ren Yufei," he said. Not a question, a statement, accompanied by frank curiosity. "What are you doing at a public festival? Alone? Without anyone to intimidate?" "I am here on business. The property auction isn't until tomorrow morning." Xiao Chengyu said this so casually, so matter-of-factly, that Wei Jian stared at him. "How do you know about the auction?" "I'm buying the property next to yours." He offered the candied fruit skewer. "Want one? The vendor 3 stalls down is better, but this one has better plum flavor." Wei Jian stared at the offered skewer. In the novel, Ren Yufei's first interaction with Xiao Chengyu involved throwing a cup of tea at him and accusing him of spying. It was a whole thing. There was a very dramatic confrontation in a tea house. It took 2 chapters. Wei Jian took the candied fruit. It was good, really good. The plum flavor was exactly as described. Xiao Chengyu watched him eat it with an expression of absolute delight, like he had personally achieved something great. "You're different," he said, which was becoming a concerning pattern. First Shen Liuhe, now him. Was it that obvious? "People change," Wei Jian said neutrally. "Ren Yufei doesn't change. He's been the same since he was 12. Xiao Chengyu said this with no particular judgment, just observation. Then he tilted his head again. "Did something happen to you?" "I was unwell." "You keep saying that." He paused. "You cancelled the trade route harassment." Wei Jian sighed. "Also yes. That was hurting about 300 families across the southern provinces." Xiao Chengyu's voice was still light, but his eyes were different now. Careful, watching. "Those families have been doing better these past 3 weeks." Wei Jian looked at him. "Good," he said simply. That was the point. The silence between them was different from the silence with Shen Liuhe. Shen Liuhe's silence had been cold and sharp. This one was warm and strange, like Xiao Chengyu was quietly recalculating something. Then the crowd surged around a corner, and a large group of festival-goers suddenly pushed between them, and Wei Jian grabbed onto the nearest stall post to avoid being carried away. When the crowd cleared, Xiao Chengyu was standing very close enough that Wei Jian could see the tiny gold flecks in his eyes. "You should stay for the lantern lighting," Xiao Chengyu said. His voice was softer now. "It's the best part. I have accounts to review." "Everyone has accounts to review. The accounts will still be there tomorrow." He smiled. "Stay." It was such a simple word, said so simply, without pressure, without expectation, just an invitation. Wei Jian should have said no. He stayed. They walked through the festival for 2 hours, and Xiao Chengyu talked the entire time. About the vendors, about the city politics, about a trade deal he was negotiating, about a terrible joke he had heard that morning. He talked like breathing, easy and constant, and Wei Jian found himself listening without meaning to. When the lanterns were released into the night sky, hundreds of warm orange lights rising over the capital, Xiao Chengyu stood beside him and said nothing at all. That was somehow worse than all the talking. Wei Jian looked at the lanterns. He did not look at Xiao Chengyu. He absolutely did not notice the way the lantern light fell on his face. He went home that night and stared at his accounts and thought about vegetables. The vegetables were not very comforting. Wei Jian was starting to think the universe was personally against him. He had a list of places Shen Liuhe should not be. The list was very long. It included the Eastern Market, the Ren Estate Library, the tea house on Silk Street, the Southern Bridge at dawn, and the very specific quiet garden in the estate where Wei Jian went every morning to think about vegetables. Shen Liuhe had now appeared in every single one of those locations. It was week 5. Wei Jian was beginning to lose his mind. "Why?" he asked Doufu one morning, as he looked out the window to see Shen Liuhe standing in his garden like he had always been there. "Is he in my garden again?" Doufu looked nervous. He said he was passing through. This garden does not lead anywhere. It is enclosed on all four sides. Yes, my lord. So he is not passing through. He is simply standing there. Yes, my lord. Wei Jian pressed his fingers to his temples. In the novel, Shen Liuhe avoided Ren Yufei as much as Ren Yufei avoided him. They only met when the plot forced them to confrontations, competitions, dramatic sword-point conversations. They did not just quietly coexist in the same spaces. That was not a thing that happened. And yet, he went down to the garden because ignoring the male lead entirely seemed like it might cause a different kind of problem. Shen Liuhe was standing near the small pond, looking at the water. He didn't turn around when Wei Jian approached, which was either very rude or very comfortable, depending on how you looked at it. You are in my garden, Wei Jian said. Yes, Shen Liuhe agreed. This is the third time this week. Yes. Do you plan to explain why? A pause. Shen Liuhe turned. His expression was unreadable, but something at the edge of it was uncertain, which was strange. In the novel, Shen Liuhe was never uncertain. He was always correct, always composed, always the most competent person in every room. You told the city guard to release the detained merchants from Wuling district, he said. They were wrongly detained, Wei Jian said. Previous Ren Yufei, he himself had ordered it, had created a false tariff violation case. I corrected it. Those merchants trade through Shen family territory. I know. You had no reason to help them. Wei Jian looked at him. They were innocent people sitting in a cell. I had every reason. The uncertainty in Shen Liuhe's expression deepened. It was like watching someone try to solve an equation where the answer kept coming out wrong. You are not what I expected, Shen Liuhe said, very quietly. People change, Wei Jian said, for probably the 5th time since arriving in this world. Not like this. Shen Liuhe studied him. Not this completely. Not this fast. Wei Jian said nothing. There was not a lot he could say without accidentally revealing that he was, in fact, a transmigrated college student who had died over noodles. The silence stretched between them. A bird called somewhere in the garden. The pond reflected the morning sky. The Shen estate will be hosting a trade summit next month, Shen Liuhe said finally. Your presence would be useful. Wei Jian blinked. You are inviting me? I am stating that your presence would be useful. Shen Liuhe's voice was back to its usual even flatness. You may interpret that how you like. He left. Wei Jian stood next to the pond for a long time after that. An invitation from Shen Liuhe. In the novel, Ren Yufei had gate-crashed the Shen summit uninvited and caused 3 separate scenes. He had not been quietly, calmly, almost shyly invited. Something was shifting. Wei Jian could feel it, like the plot bending around him in ways it was not supposed to. He went back inside, sat down at his desk, and wrote 2 letters. One to decline 4 social engagements he did not want to attend. One accepting the summit invitation because refusing would probably cause more problems. He was doing this for practical reasons, political reasons, trade reasons. He was not doing it because Shen Liuhe had looked at him like he was something worth figuring out. He absolutely was not. He was a little bit. The Shen estate was exactly as the novel described it. Enormous, white, full of sword cultivators, who walked like they were always prepared to fight someone, and cold, in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Wei Jian arrived with Doufu and 2 guards he had hired, specifically because they had no connection to Ren Yufei's old schemes, and therefore no reason to do anything suspicious. The summit was attended by about 40 powerful families. Wei Jian spent the first 2 hours being excessively polite to everyone, and watching people stare at him like he had grown a second head. Apparently Ren Yufei's reputation was bad enough that basic politeness read as threatening. Xiao Chengyu appeared at his elbow at the mid-morning tea break. You're being so normal, he said, sounding personally offended. Do you know how boring that is? Everyone was expecting drama. I am not here for drama, Wei Jian said. That's the most dramatic thing you could have said. Xiao Chengyu handed him a cup of tea. Shen Liuhe keeps looking at you. He does not. He does. He's done it 14 times since you arrived. I counted. Wei Jian looked up. Across the main hall, Shen Liuhe was standing with a group of family heads. He was not looking at Wei Jian. He was looking away very deliberately. which, in its own way, was also looking. Wei Jian drank his tea. The afternoon session was a trade negotiation between 6 families over a river route. Wei Jian had done his research. He had the numbers when an elder from the Zhao family proposed a toll system that would disadvantage the smaller southern merchants. Wei Jian quietly and precisely explained why it would destabilize the whole regional economy in about 2 years. The room went silent. Shen Liuhe, who was chairing the session, looked at him for a long moment. "That is correct," Shen Liuhe said. The Zhao elder was overruled. Xiao Chengyu leaned over from Wei Jian's left. "Did you just do economic analysis in the middle of a political summit?" "Someone had to," Wei Jian said. "I'm a little bit in love with you right now," Xiao Chengyu said, very pleasantly. Wei Jian choked on air. The scandal happened in the evening, which Wei Jian had not planned for and could not have predicted. A minor lord from the north had arrived drunk, started making accusations about trade fraud, pointed at Wei Jian specifically, and then tripped over a table and knocked an entire display of flower arrangements directly onto Wei Jian and Shen Liuhe, who were unfortunately standing next to each other. In the chaos of falling flowers and shouting guests, someone grabbed Wei Jian's hand. He looked down. Shen Liuhe's hand, around his, grip steady and warm, pulling him to the side before a falling decorative urn could hit his shoulder. The urn crashed where Wei Jian had been standing. The room was still loud and chaotic. Nobody was looking at them specifically. Shen Liuhe had probably just been moving him out of danger, automatically, without thinking. Except he had not let go. They stood there for approximately 4 seconds, which is a very long time when someone is holding your hand, and Wei Jian's brain had officially stopped working. Shen Liuhe seemed to realize it at the same moment. He released Wei Jian's hand. His expression was perfectly composed, but the very tips of his ears had gone slightly pink. "You were in the way of the urn," he said. "Yes," Wei Jian agreed. "That is all." "Of course." They both looked straight ahead at the chaos of the room. Xiao Chengyu materialized from somewhere to Wei Jian's right with the expression of someone who had seen everything and was going to remember it forever. "I counted," he said softly, that lasted exactly 4 seconds. "Shut up," Wei Jian said. Xiao Chengyu smiled like the sunrise. That night, alone in the guest room Shen Liuhe had provided, Wei Jian stared at the ceiling and had a very serious conversation with himself. The conversation went like this. "You are transmigrated. This is not your world. These people are characters in a story. You have a plan. The plan is vegetables and a small house. The plan does not include feelings. The plan definitely does not include whatever is happening with your heart right now." His heart did not respond to logic. Somewhere in the estate, a night bird was singing. Wei Jian pulled a pillow over his face. This was a problem. He tried. He genuinely tried. He went back to the Ren estate. He reorganized his accounts. He donated a frankly unreasonable amount of money to 3 rural schools because it seemed like a good thing to do, and also because Ren Yufei's original wealth came from methods that made Wei Jian uncomfortable. He began drafting plans for a small property in the southern hills, somewhere quiet, somewhere with good soil for a garden. He did not think about Shen Liuhe's hand. He did not think about the way Xiao Chengyu had looked at him across the festival lanterns. He was fine. He was absolutely, completely not at all fine. On a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday in this world, Doufu came running in with the expression of someone delivering both good and terrible news at once. "My lord," Doufu said, slightly out of breath. "Young Master Shen and young Master Xiao are both here." Wei Jian put down his pen. "At the same time." "At the same time, yes, my lord. They arrived from different directions and are currently standing in the entrance hall, sir, being very polite to each other in the way that actually means they are not being polite at all." Wei Jian walked to the entrance hall. Shen Liuhe and Xiao Chengyu were indeed both there. Shen Liuhe stood on the left, face blank, posture rigid. Xiao Chengyu stood on the right, smiling, but the smile had the particular quality of a smile used in place of something sharper. They both turned to look at Wei Jian the moment he appeared. "I came to discuss the summit follow-up," Shen Liuhe said. "I came to talk about the Southern Merchant Coalition," Xiao Chengyu said, at exactly the same moment. The two of them looked at each other. Wei Jian looked at both of them. Then he looked at Doufu. Doufu mouthed, "I am sorry, my lord." "Come in," Wei Jian said, because there was no alternative. "Both of you, we can discuss everything together." What followed was the most exhausting meeting of Wei Jian's transmigrated life. It was not that either Shen Liuhe or Xiao Chengyu was difficult, exactly. They were both professional. They were both focused on legitimate topics. They also disagreed on almost every point in the gentlest, most polite, most absolutely immovable way possible, and they kept directing their points at Wei Jian specifically, as if he was the deciding vote in a competition he had not entered. By hour 2, Wei Jian had resolved 4 trade disputes, rewritten a contract clause, and was strongly reconsidering his plan to stay in this world at all. "Can we agree," he said, during a brief silence, "on the river toll structure? Xiao Chengyu's model, with Shen Liuhe's proposed safeguards for the northern routes. Both parties benefit." They both looked at him. "Yes," Shen Liuhe said. "Fine by me," Xiao Chengyu said, sounding almost surprised. "Good." Wei Jian poured himself tea. "Is there anything else?" There was a pause. "You're very good at this," Xiao Chengyu said. He sounded genuinely impressed. "Mediating, organizing. You dissolved a conflict that's been running for 3 months in about 2 hours." "The conflict was not complicated," Wei Jian said. "Both parties wanted the same thing. They were just approaching it from opposite angles." Shen Liuhe was looking at him again with that expression. The one Wei Jian had started calling the recalculating expression. "You could do significant good," Shen Liuhe said, "with the Ren Estate's resources and your current approach." "I plan to," Wei Jian said honestly. Another pause. "What are you doing for dinner?" Xiao Chengyu asked. Shen Liuhe's gaze snapped to him. "That question," Shen Liuhe said, "was not part of the agenda." "I don't have an agenda," Xiao Chengyu said pleasantly. "I'm just hungry, and the food at the Ren Estate smells excellent." Wei Jian looked between the two of them, the cold, precise cultivation master and the bright, chaotic merchant prince, and thought about his small house in the southern hills. "Stay for dinner," he said. "Both of you. We can finalize the documentation." Xiao Chengyu looked triumphant. Shen Liuhe looked like he had not decided whether to be annoyed or not. Doufu, from the doorway, made a face that said, "My lord, I will need to prepare more food." The dinner was actually, surprisingly, genuinely pleasant. Xiao Chengyu told terrible jokes. Shen Liuhe critiqued every single one of them with surgical precision, which was somehow funnier than the jokes themselves. Wei Jian found himself laughing at the argument more than anything else. A real laugh, unplanned, the kind that comes out before you can stop it. Both of them looked at him when he laughed. Neither of them said anything. But they both stayed until the candles burned low. The letter arrived on a gray morning in the 6th week. It was addressed to Wei Jian in handwriting he did not recognize, sealed with a mark he did not know, and the contents were brief and alarming. "We know what happened to the real Ren Yufei. Come alone to the old mill north of the city before the new moon. Do not involve the Shen or Xiao families. If you do, the information becomes public." Wei Jian read it 3 times. Then he sat very still for a very long time. Someone knew, or suspected, or was bluffing with a very educated guess. He did not know which, but all 3 options were bad. He put the letter in his desk drawer, canceled his afternoon plans, and spent 2 hours thinking. The real Ren Yufei was presumably gone. Wei Jian had arrived in this body, and the original soul had not been present. He did not know what that meant, and he had been carefully not thinking about it. The body was alive. The memories, patchy, emotional flashes, nothing clear, were available to him. Whatever had happened to Ren Yufei before him was not something he could fix, but someone out there was treating it as leverage. He did not want to go to a secluded mill alone. That was how people died in stories. He had read enough novels to know that. He also could not tell Shen Liuhe or Xiao Chengyu. The letter specifically warned against it, and more practically, what would he even say? "Hello, I am not actually Ren Yufei. I am a college student who was killed by a ceiling fan. Please advise?" He went to the mill. He was not reckless about it. He told Doufu where he was going and when he expected to return. He brought a small blade hidden in his sleeve. He had been quietly practicing with it for weeks, because a defenseless villain body seemed like a very bad idea. He arrived early and checked the area before going inside. There was one person waiting, a woman in plain clothes, maybe 40, with the posture of someone who had worked very hard physical jobs her whole life and was not apologetic about it. Her name, she told him immediately, was Madame Fei. She had been Ren Yufei's private tutor when he was young, before the young lord's father had dismissed her, before everything had gone wrong. He was not always what he became, she said, looking at Wei Jian with an expression that was grieving something old. The boy I taught was curious, kind. He asked questions about everything. She paused. You remind me of him. Wei Jian said nothing. Whatever happened, Madame Fei said, however you came to be in that body, I think it might be that the universe gave him a second chance. Through you. She looked at him steadily. I am not here to expose you. I am here to warn you. There are people who knew the old Ren Yufei's plans he made before you arrived. They will move forward with those plans, expecting you to be who you were. If you are not prepared, you will be caught in them. She told him what the plans were. Wei Jian listened. They were bad, worse than bad. The original Ren Yufei had been planning to destabilize 3 provinces' trade routes, plant evidence to implicate the Shen family in fraud, and use the resulting chaos to consolidate power. The schemes were already in motion, arranged by people who had served Ren Yufei loyally for years. If Wei Jian did not stop them, they would unfold. People would be hurt. The Shen family, Shen Liuhe, would be hurt. Xiao Chengyu's merchant coalition would be destroyed. He rode back to the estate with the afternoon sky going orange over the hills, and he understood, sitting in the saddle with the wind cold on his face, that his plan had just changed. He could not go to the south and grow vegetables, not yet. Not until he had dismantled every scheme the original Ren Yufei had set in motion. That was going to require help. Specifically, it was going to require trusting 2 people he had been very carefully trying not to get close to. He arrived home, walked into his study, sat at his desk, and wrote 2 letters. One to Shen Liuhe, one to Xiao Chengyu. I need to tell you something. It will sound unbelievable. I am going to tell you anyway, because the alternative is worse. Please come. He sealed them. He handed them to Doufu. He sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling and thought, this is it. This is the part where everything either gets better or completely falls apart. Doufu hovered in the doorway. My lord, are you all right? I have no idea, Wei Jian said honestly. Doufu nodded with the wisdom of someone who had long accepted that their employer was entirely beyond prediction. Shall I bring tea? Yes, Wei Jian said. A lot of it. They came the next evening. Shen Liuhe arrived first, exactly on time, because of course he did. Xiao Chengyu arrived 2 minutes later, slightly out of breath, which suggested he had hurried, which suggested the letter had worried him, which Wei Jian filed away and tried not to think about too much. They sat across from Wei Jian in the study, and they both looked at him with different versions of careful attention, and Wei Jian thought, I have prepared for this. I know what I want to say. I have planned it. He had not planned for how hard it would be to actually say it. What I am about to tell you, he began, is going to sound like I have lost my mind. I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Xiao Chengyu nodded. Shen Liuhe said nothing, which was his version of agreement. Wei Jian told them everything, not just the schemes, everything, where he had actually come from, what had happened to him, what he remembered of the original Ren Yufei and what he did not, the novel, the plot he had been trying to avoid, the ceiling fan, all of it. He spoke for a long time, looking at the desk, and when he finally stopped talking and looked up, both of them were very still. Xiao Chengyu's expression had done several things during the explanation: surprise, disbelief, something softer and more complicated, and finally something that looked a lot like understanding. Shen Liuhe's expression had not changed at all during the entire thing, but his hands, resting on his knees, were very slightly not relaxed. The silence was long. So, Xiao Chengyu said finally, you're from another world. You died. You woke up in this body. And your entire plan was to collect money and moved to the countryside. Yes, Wei Jian said. That is, Xiao Chengyu said, the most heartbreaking and also somehow funniest thing I have ever heard. Wei Jian exhaled. The schemes, Shen Liuhe said. His voice was very quiet. How long to dismantle them? Wei Jian blinked. That's your first question? The information about your origin is significant, Shen Liuhe said, but it does not change the immediate problem. How long? 3 months, maybe 4, if we work together. Some of the arrangements are buried in the estate's accounting records. Others are through proxies I need to identify. Shen Liuhe nodded. Tell me what you need. Just like that. No interrogation, no disbelief, no drama. Just tell me what you need. Something cracked open quietly in Wei Jian's chest. Xiao Chengyu leaned forward. I want to say something, and I want you to actually hear it. He looked at Wei Jian directly, with none of his usual brightness masking the seriousness underneath it. You've been here 2 months. You've reversed every harm you could find. You've helped people you had no reason to help. You've been honest with us right now when you could have just dealt with this alone. He paused. Whatever you are, wherever you came from, what you've done here is real, and it matters. Wei Jian looked at him. He was not prepared for that. He had prepared for doubt. He had prepared for suspicion. He had not prepared for someone looking at him with complete conviction and telling him that he mattered. He looked at Shen Liuhe. Shen Liuhe was watching him with the recalculating expression. Then, slowly, it resolved into something else, something quieter. You were planning to leave, Shen Liuhe said. It was not quite a question. Eventually, yes, once everything was resolved. And now? Wei Jian opened his mouth, closed it. He thought about the garden in the morning, the dinner with bad jokes and good food, the lanterns rising over the capital, 4 seconds of a hand around his, warm and certain, the way both of them had stayed until the candles burned down without either of them seeming to notice time passing. I don't know, he said honestly. Xiao Chengyu smiled, slow and real. Nothing performed about it. Shen Liuhe looked at Wei Jian for a long moment, then looked away, and there it was, the tips of his ears, slightly pink. Then stay, Shen Liuhe said quietly, until you do. 4 months later, the last of the old schemes was dismantled. It had not been simple or quick or painless. There had been 3 confrontations with people who had served Ren Yufei's old plans. There had been a very difficult night in month 2, when one of the proxy agents had gone public with a distorted version of events, and Wei Jian had spent 48 hours managing the fallout while running on almost no sleep. There had been a moment in month 3 when Shen Liuhe had put himself physically between Wei Jian and a drawn sword, and Wei Jian had approximately stopped breathing for the rest of that afternoon. There had also been a lot of other things, smaller things, the kind that accumulate quietly. Xiao Chengyu leaving candied fruit on Wei Jian's desk when he came to work on trade documents. Shen Liuhe appearing in the garden not to say anything in particular, but just to be there, in the same space, standing at the edge of the pond. The 3 of them eating dinner together so many times it stopped feeling like an occasion and started feeling like Tuesday. Wei Jian told them both, separately, 1 month apart, that he had feelings he had not intended and was uncertain what to do with them. Xiao Chengyu had laughed, taken Wei Jian's face between his hands, and said, Finally, I was waiting for you to figure that out. Shen Liuhe had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, in the most carefully composed voice Wei Jian had ever heard, I have not known how to say this for some time. He had looked at the pond. I am glad you stayed. It was not simple. 3 people never is. There were conversations that were difficult and honest and took a long time. There were nights Wei Jian lay awake, wondering if this was real, if he was real, if he had the right to want this when he had come from somewhere else entirely. But Xiao Chengyu had looked at him once, serious in the way he rarely was, and said, You keep asking if you have the right to be here. You've spent 4 months proving you do. Stop asking the question and start living the answer. And Shen Liuhe, who expressed things with actions more than words, had placed Wei Jian's hand in both of his own one evening and simply held it. No explanation, no demand, just warmth and steadiness, and the message, very clear and very quiet. I am not going anywhere. The small house in the southern hills was purchased in the 5th month. It had good soil, it had a view of the mountains. It needed significant renovation, and Xiao Chengyu declared himself in charge of the interior design, which resulted in 3 separate heated debates about curtain colors that somehow ended in all of them laughing. Shen Liuhe showed up to the first renovation day with blueprints he had apparently drawn himself, quietly, without telling anyone. Wei Jian stood in the half-repaired house with plaster dust on his sleeves, and both of them arguing about load-bearing walls behind him, and thought, I died over a cup of instant noodles. And somehow I ended up here. He went out to stand in the garden, just cleared dirt for now, waiting for seeds. He knelt down and pressed his hand flat against the soil. It was cool and dark and full of potential. Du Fu appeared at the doorway. My lord, young Master Shin says the eastern wall is structurally sound, and young Master Xiao says it isn't, and I think they might actually come to blows over it. They won't, Wei Jian said. Are you sure, my lord? Yes. Go tell them I am starting the garden and I need help. That will end the argument. Du Fu disappeared. 30 seconds later, both of them appeared in the garden doorway. Shen Liuhe, with blueprints still rolled under his arm, Xiao Chengyu, with a new smudge of something on his cheek from somewhere. They looked at Wei Jian, crouching in the dirt. I need to know where to plant the vegetables, Wei Jian said, very seriously. Xiao Chengyu burst out laughing. Shen Liuhe made a sound that was almost, nearly, just barely a laugh. More like the beginning of one, caught and held, but still real. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning the garden. Not the story's garden, not the plot's garden, not Ren Yufei's garden. Wei Jian's garden, with seeds he had chosen, soil he had turned with his own hands, and 2 people who had found him in the middle of a story that was supposed to go very differently, and decided, without being asked, that they wanted to stay in whatever version he was writing instead. The novel had ended with a grand battle, a dramatic reunion, and a very long epilogue about destiny. Wei Jian's version ended with dirt under his fingernails, warm light over the mountains, and the sound of someone he loved laughing at something silly behind him. He thought, this is enough. He thought, this is more than enough. He thought, I need to plant the carrots before sundown. He planted the carrots,